Prologue. A handsome young man, around 16 or 17 years old, walked inside his room on a summer afternoon. The lad was sweating a bit, and judging by his thick leather garments and the sword that he was carrying, it was obvious that he spent the whole day training. Taking his time to clean himself, he dried his shoulder-length silver-gold hair, braided it backward, and wore a comfortable and clean black tunic, all while he was humming a song with a melancholic look in his deep purple eyes. Whatever he was thinking, his thought was interrupted by 3 knocks on the heavy wooden doors of his quarters. Knock, 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 your grace. Don't forget to sleep early today. Tomorrow we are riding to the Westerlands. Taking a deep breath, the young man sighed. It's fine, Ser Barristan. You know that I am always on point. I wouldn't miss it. He could hear a chuckle from the other side of the door, followed by Ser Barristan's solemn voice. Your grace, it's just that. Your father is not the most patient one. Closing his eyes and laying down on his bed, he replied. I will be there in time. By the way, how's mother? She is fine, your grace, Barristan spoke. She has been very happy with the whole ordeal. Now go rest. The young man turned his back to the door and muttered to himself sarcastically. I wonder why. Letting out a depressed chuckle, he tried to sleep. He tossed and turned for about an hour. Not being able to sleep, he got up and walked to a table nearby his bed, grabbing some fruits to eat before he heard flapping sounds by his window. When he turned his head to see what it was, his eyes went wide. A bird, not a regular bird nor a raven, but a bird almost half his size, with red and orange feathers, an elegant beast that almost looked like it was made of fire, settled on the window and dropped a rolled parchment and what it looked like it was a big coin from its beak. Hello, said the young man to the bird, even knowing it would be crazy to talk to beasts, but this one bird, in particular, was very unique and exotic. He saw the beast eyeing the fruits in his hand with a solemn face, well as solemn as a bird can look, and chuckled. I bet that you are hungry, said the young man, offering a few berries to the bird, who ate them without a care in the world. Ha ha ha, he chuckled and tried to pet the bird but almost got his hand pecked. Okay, I got it. No hands. By the 7, you are a proud bird, aren't you? But where was that pride when you devoured my berries a few moments ago? The young man asked teasingly. He could have sworn that he heard the bird making a humph sound while avoiding his gaze, which made him laugh even louder. Not wanting to have to deal with it anymore, the bird flapped its wings and flew off into the distance, quickly fading from the young man's view. Well, that happened. He chuckled once again before his eyes landed on the rolled parchment that was left on by his window. Raising one of his eyebrows, he grabbed it and laid down on his bed before started reading it. Greetings, young Targaryen. It's been quite a while since I had contact with anyone of your house, but considering what that big fat oaf of a king did, it's no surprise, is it? I am sending you this message because I judged you of being worthy of your name. For over almost a century your house has been in a terrible decline. I had my hopes up for your great-grandfather, but I couldn't reach him in time. I heard what happened on the day of your birth, and my condolences. I know what plagues your mind, young Targaryen. It was also the cause of many rises and downfalls of others before you, and yes, I have some answers that you seek. Find me, and you may get them. Keep the medallion that came with this scroll, otherwise, you will never accomplish your task. You have 5 years, young Targaryen. In 5 years I will get my medallion back, and you will be on your own. I shall give you one hint. Dragonlord, we shall meet if fate allows us. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. Signed, the first Elven King. He finished reading, then he did it again, and then a third time. Who is this person? He talked about us like we were old acquaintances. He did say he met others before. A fat king? Is he talking about King Aegon IV? How old is this man? Many questions popped up inside the young man's head, and if he had problems sleeping before, now he was certain that he wouldn't be able to close his eyes at all. Grabbing the item that was left with the parchment and taking a good look at it, he saw what seemed to be a house sigil. The medallion was blood red with silver trimming all around it, and a golden dragon etched on the center. He said, Dragonlord. Getting up from his bed and putting the medallion inside an inner pocket of his tunic, he dashed outside his room and started walking around the huge castle in a hurry. Many questions covered his thoughts, but he had some hints. This man and his house have met. This man knew about their history. This man knew about their prophecies. This man must be recorded in some of the old archives in our library. If he is related to a Dragonlord family like us and met our house before, I do not doubt that my ancestors left something about him. As he was talking to himself, a soft, fragile, and sweet female voice reached his ears. Rhaegar, what are you doing this late, walking alone around the Red Keep? Turning to the side, he saw his mother walking out of one of the rooms of the castle. He knew exactly which room it was, the room in which his newborn brother, young Viserys, rested. I'm sorry, mother. I remembered something that I had to do before leaving for Casterly Rock in the morrow. I can't sleep while leaving unfinished businesses, you know well of that, he said in a soft voice. This woman meant the world to him, and even though they grew distant because of his father's behavior, he had nothing but love for her. She gave him a loving smile. Is it about those books again? He avoided her gaze mayhaps. She chuckled, a grown-up man still in love with his books. I wonder from whom you got that? He shrugged, probably great-grandfather. I've heard that he was a very wise king. Her eyes saddened instantly when hearing about her grandfather, but tried her best to hide it. Very well, don't stay up too late. You will be leaving at dawn. Mayhaps you will find a lovely lady in Casterly Rock to bring back home and take you away from those old dusty books? She said teasingly. But I don't agree with you being alone. I will talk to Ser Barristan to follow you on your studies, she demanded before walking towards her private quarters. Rieger's sweat dropped. Well, mother. Ser Barristan is already busy with his Kingsguard duties. Why don't you talk to Ser Arthur instead? She stopped in her tracks and narrowed her eyes while staring at her son. Sure. Walking fast towards the library, he spotted an armored man, bearing the Targaryen sigil on his breastplate, arriving slowly. How in seven hells did mother make him come this fast? He stopped in front of the young prince and bowed his head. Your grace. Rieger nodded. Ser Arthur. Thank you for coming. It's my duty, your grace. They walked inside the vast library and, honestly, the place had a weird smell as it was filled with dusty books that were hundreds of years old and kept in an enclosed room. Rieger spent the first hour looking around and going through piles of books, yet he found nothing. No, he didn't read those books, but the history of the Targaryens in those books was only about their own house, and mostly about dragons and the kings. Whatever hint he was looking for was not on those big tomes. Your grace, you still need to wake up early. Giving an exasperated sigh, then help me, Ser Arthur. We can double our speed. The Kingsguard shook his head. My hands must be always free in case of an emergency. Your grace, I can't protect you if I'm busy holding books. Rieger stared at his old friend defiantly. Then you can't complain in case I take the whole night to find what I'm looking for. You either help me or stay silent. Arthur was conflicted and gave up. It's better to speed things up than have the crown prince late for his departure. After locking the doors of the library for safety, the knight followed Rieger. What are we looking for, your grace? Thinking for a bit, Rieger replied, look for old records. Not those big history books, something more personal, more intimate. Mayhaps a diary? If what I'm thinking is correct, we must look for the diary or some personal notes related to the most well-respected Targaryen kings. You can skip King Aegon V. You go look for something related to King Daeron II, and I will look for something about King Jaehaerys I. Try finding something related to great-granduncle Aemon as well. He didn't have much hope for Daeron II or Aemon. The note said that they were in contact with House Targaryen for a while, and considering how the word worthy was used, he judged that only the best Targaryen kings ever had contact with whomever this person was. It was crazy to think someone could live that long to actually be in touch with a king that lived nearly 200 years ago. After 5 hours of searching, he got a few small and thin books that looked more like personal notes. He found nothing about King Daeron II in this person, and he found nothing whatsoever about his great-granduncle Aemon. He must have taken all of his private notes with him when he left. He did find old dusty and half-ruined pages related to King Jaehaerys I, Visenya Targaryen, and, surprisingly, Rhaenyra Targaryen, who was never a queen. Mayhaps a Targaryen doesn't need to be a king to be considered worthy by this person after all. Well, he wasn't a king either, but he was bound to become one, being the crown prince, so he thought it was something related with bearing the crown. After spending another hour reading many private records of many stupid and, honestly, pointless blabbering in those notes, he finally got a hit, and when he finally got it, he couldn't help but curse. "Fuck," said Rieger out loud. Your grace? Ser Arthur raised an eyebrow. It was very uncommon for Rieger to curse after all. Taking a deep breath, Rieger stood up. Lead me to my quarters, Ser Arthur. I have to sleep as much as I can, and please, wake me up by any means necessary. I can't be late, he said with a defeated tone before walking out of the library. Yes, your grace, leave it to me, he nodded solemnly. But, did you find anything that you were looking for? After yawning, Rieger answered, yes, after the tournament is over. We will have to find a way for my father to allow me to leave King's Landing for a while. And where we are going, your grace? Now it was time for Rieger's eyebrow to raise. Well, I'm already part of this, and you will need protection anyway. Who is better to defend your grace than me? Said the Kingsguard while smirking. Just admit it, you are as curious as I am, aren't you? Mayhaps. So, where are we going? To the north. Chapter 1. Dreams of destruction. Fuck my life. A male voice echoed through the white halls of a huge palace overseeing a big volcano in the distance, with a small river of lava flowing beneath. This cannot be happening. The young man couldn't possibly understand what the fuck was going on. One day he was walking back home from his job, and then he wasn't. It was like stepping through a portal suddenly without any hint or warning. To make things worse, he was not even in his own body. It felt like some sort of god or ROB played a prank on him and decided to just move on with its existence, leaving him here, with no way home. But then one might ask, where is here? That was a question that he wanted to find an answer to at first, but when he got it, he regretted it instantly. Fucking a Song of Ice and Fire universe. He could only sit down on the balcony overseeing the small river of lava. The only comfort he had now was that he really liked his new identity. He always felt he was kind of above average before, but now? He looked like the 16-year-old version of goddamn Thranduil. Well, minus the pointy ears, of course. Staring at the river of lava below and the many flying lizards above, he could only sigh, defeated, lost. Brother, where are you? He heard an angelic, sweet voice from within the huge tower/palace that he had found himself in, and after turning around he found the most gorgeous-looking girl he has ever seen in his life. And she fucking called me brother? Wait, we are Valyrians of old. So does that mean that, oh shit? She had long silver hair with bright, almost glowing, purple eyes that looked like amethyst more than actual irises. Her figure was perfect on his scale, but she was a bit too young for his taste. But there were other issues to be addressed. Whomever dropped him in this body, in this world, was an asshole. There were no memories. He didn't know shit about who he was, who she was, or what year this was. The only silver lining is that not having this body's old memories, he couldn't really see this girl as his sister. Not that it made it any difference. Incest is still incest with or without amnesia. Hello there, he said weakly, still trying to process all the information he got in the last 30 minutes. Brother, what are you doing here all alone? You have been acting weird lately, barely eating. Is there anything that is bothering you? He had to come up with something, and something fast and believable. This world was a world of magic, especially if it was back in the old Valyrian Empire days. Wait, I got it. He looked at her and gave her a slightly forced smile. I had some visions, dear sister. She raised an eyebrow cutely and stared at him. Really now? Just like that little girl from the Targaryens? And he choked. Fuck. The girl, seeing her brother getting paler and paler and choking, came beside him and tried to help him, and once he finally stopped, she hugged him lovingly. You can tell me, brother. I won't make fun of you. She thought that he was afraid of being ridiculed like the little girl had been when she spoke of her weird dreams of destruction. He closed his eyes trying to calm down. First of all, he was in the Song of Ice and Fire universe back in the days of Old Valyria. He knew well the series but gave up after waiting 8 years after the damn abysmal Season 8 of Game of Thrones, only to hear that the author finally kicked the bucket and never finished his work. Second, he was not a huge nerd or gamer guy. He only had a few games that he really played in his whole life, so he couldn't use ideas from games and other stuff like many fanfic protagonists did. The only games he ever played was the old Advanced Dungeons & Dragons when he was around 13, World of Warcraft when he was in high school, and later on, Dark Souls, which became his favorite franchise of all time. He tried many others, but never really delved deep into them. Third, he didn't have much knowledge of the modern world that would give him an edge over everyone else. He didn't know how the fuck crop rotation worked. He was a city boy, goddammit. He was a biology professor who taught at a well-renowned university. He did have a talent and love for painting and writing, but who the fuck gives a shit about that in Westeros? And fourth, and most importantly, he had no cheats, no system, no improved body, no perfect memory, no unlimited talent. He was just as normal as anyone else in this world. Brother. He finally came out from his thoughts and stared at the girl, or should he say, young woman, by this world's standards, beside him. I'm sorry, sister, it's just that. You can tell me. Brother, I will always be by your side. He looked at her and took a deep breath. Would you believe me if I told you I lost my memories? Her eyes went wide. You what? Did someone practice some wicked blood magic on you? Wait, is it related to your dreams? He nodded weakly. For the last part. Do you remember anything at all? He shook his head. No. I'm quite happy that I can still communicate with you, though, and that I can read and possibly write in our language. I remember a bit of this place, but it's more like a general knowledge instead of our family. I don't even remember my name. She stared at him with worried eyes. She could see that he was feeling panicked and lost. Do you remember your dream? He nodded his head yes. The dream of destruction? Now it was her time to choke. Why you two? Are you sure? Everyone is making fun of the Targaryens after the girl squealed out loud at the Dragon Square. You won't do the same, will you, brother? That would ruin the reputation of our family. He looked at her with a solemn gaze. Answer me, dear sister, did the Targaryens leave? She shook her head. No, well, there are talks that they are preparing to leave. Some of the other 40 families actually bought their land already, but since it was quite recent, I believe that they will take a month or two to actually move. They do have quite a lot of people to take with them. They are a small Dragonlord family, but they are still a Dragonlord family regardless. He took a deep breath and finally felt relieved. A huge boulder was removed from his shoulders. I have time. They will leave from 10 to 12 years before the doom. So, I have time. Plenty of time. He couldn't help but smile a bit, which made his sister smile sweetly in return. Tell me about us. You said the Targaryens are a small Dragonlord family. So where are we on the scale? Well, we are the second of the Sacred Five, she answered like it was common knowledge. Sacred Five? What is that? He was genuinely confused. There was not much in-depth information about the Old Valyrian families before the doom in any of the books. The girl massaged her forehead, already feeling a headache forming. Well, excuse you, I was dragged into this and I didn't get any freebies. The Sacred Five are the top 5 families among all the Dragonlord families in the Valyrian freehold, and the oldest. We predate the foundation of the Valyrian empires. Our family exists for almost 5,000 years. Oh, second greatest? Well, perhaps I did get some freebies after all, he smirked. All of the Dragonlord families are considered nobles in the freehold and hold quite a bit of power, but the Sacred Five were never challenged because each of the Sacred Five has something which the Valyrian freehold would simply fall apart if removed. He nodded. We are the Regal Lion family, a proud Dragonlord family that helped shape Valyria into what it is today. We don't have many numbers in our family. Actually, in terms of numbers, we are pitifully small compared to even the weakest of the 40, but we compensate that with our talent and knowledge. He raised his eyebrow. Something that makes us the second strongest, even having the lowest numbers? Who? Well, perhaps whoever sent me here is not a complete asshole. Do tell. She glared at him with a triumphant smirk. We are the ultimate sorcerers and magic wielders among all the Valyrians. Be it low nobles or Dragonlords, our magic is unparalleled. His mouth went wide open. Say what now? Chapter 2. Tell me about myself. So, for the last 10 or so minutes, he had heard a basic summary of the information about his family's history, and boy oh boy it got him hyped about a few things. So, I am from an actual magic-related family in this world. He couldn't help but smirk. Honestly, if I had an option between anything else and magic, I would go for magic. Humans are limited by their nature, but magic is boundless. Take that, you bunch of muggles. Okay, dear sister, tell me more about my past self, he requested with a soft voice, holding his grin on his lips so he didn't look creepy. Oh, about that, brother, you actually were very interested in learning the sword from an early age, she replied with her lovely smile on display. Not that it ever helped, though. Our master of arms tried to teach you, but you couldn't just learn it. You also tried to do exercises to get more physical strength, but gave up after 6 moons of no improvement. Then you started to develop the habit of reading a lot, but... She looked at him with a sad gaze. It seems that you don't remember anything anymore. He felt crushed. And no talent for the sword? 6 months of exercise without any improvement? And the only achievement of this body was reading a lot while I have no access to its memories. The girl could see that her brother was getting all downcast again. So she panicked a bit and quickly added, Don't worry, brother. You are relatively young. You have time. He raised an eyebrow at that. Well, he knew how young he was. He was a 16-year-old Thranduil, so there was no issue with that. But he had to ask it anyway. What do you mean by relatively? She kind of avoided his gaze for a bit. You've known 30 named days. She could have sworn she heard glass breaking. Did you say 30? She nodded. Yes, brother. I myself am 9 and 10. Don't bullshit me, he shouted, not being able to hold back anymore. Honestly, she was lost. She couldn't really understand his exaggerated reaction. I look no older than 6. I mean 6 and 10 named days, and you know older than 5 and 10. He was losing it. Her eyes went wide, finally understanding. Well, remember what I told you about our low numbers? It's because of many family blood magic rituals that we've performed for thousands of years. We have a relatively long lifespan. While for others it's tough to live past their 60 or 70 named days, our family members usually live up to their 130s. We get old like others, just slower. So that's how it is. Finally, something he could work with, a longer lifespan when compared to regular people. So we are like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, humans with enhanced lifespan. But even so, he couldn't help but feel sad and mutter, to think that I've wasted 1/4 of my life and have nothing to show. He wanted to be in denial. He wanted to believe that now that a different soul inhabits this body, his talents were enhanced. That's how it always worked in fanfictions, wasn't it? But deep down he believed that nothing changed. He was no fighter, no knight, and no warrior. 30-year-old Jaime fucking Lannister would beat the shit out of him in seconds. Magic isn't my hidden ace. Magic is all I possibly have left. He stared at her, finally getting over the bitter pill. What about our parents? She lowered her head, and sadness could be seen on her pretty face. They died several years ago. They were quite old, you know. Father passed away right after turning 100. He had old wounds from a battle. We all suspect that was he poisoned back then, but he suppressed it for decades with blood magic. Mother died when I was born. Died from childbirth only 10 years before father. He narrowed his eyes. Father got poisoned? She nodded weakly. He went to explore Sithorios with his dragon, obviously not alone. We have quite a few dragon riders under our banner, even if they are not of our bloodline. Old texts of our forefathers tell us that a lot of our magical knowledge comes from the old empire of Guys. There are texts that explain that the old empire found many magical texts south after conquering Gagassos. No one but only a few dragons managed to come back, including Kilitherion, father's dragon. But just like father, it died as well. He never told me anything about it, but I always believed that he ended up having to fight basilisks in the Isle of Toads. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. Old empire of Guys? What the hell is that? It must be really old if the 5,000-year-old Valyrian freehold calls it old as well. But basilisks? Are those real? I know that it's a bit too late, but can you reintroduce yourself? And tell me my name as well. He forced a smile when asking. She chuckled, of course. My name is Vaila Regalion, younger sister of the current head of the Regalion family, Kaelaris Regalion, or as I used to call you, Kale. He started to laugh. Kale? That's a goddamn elven name. It brings me good memories. Well, at least it's a name of my own. It could have been worse, like Joe Snow or Jack Snow, aka brothers of the actual Jon Snow. As she watched her beloved brother laughing out loud, she couldn't help but pout. Don't laugh. My name comes from our mother Valyria, and your name came from father's dragon. He always preached about how a dragon needs a dragon's name. He chuckled and pet her head, which made her eye twitch. I am not laughing about our names. I find them pretty even. But what about our dragons? Do I have one as well? She nodded. Yes, of course you do. Although, we have a slightly different method of bonding with them when compared to other dragon riders. He nodded. We have weird family traditions, even for Valyrians. Got it? Explain, please. We don't really bond with grown dragons, only with dragon eggs. That is due to our blood magic rituals. It binds us with them by blood. It is what makes us stronger and what makes us live longer. All other Valyrians like to say that they have the blood of the dragons, but in our case, that saying is quite literal. Oh, that's interesting, Kale said, but tell me about my dragon. Does it have a name? Vaila shook her head. No, you never named it. You were quite scared of it, and considering his size and origin. Even I am too, by the 14, even father didn't get too close to it. Origin? Yes, they come from the Malgaran family. They are the 5th of the sacred 5 Dragonlord families. They are a very weird bunch. But no one can breed dragons like they can. Now that I think of it, the other families of the sacred 5 are kind of freaks. She said with a pensive expression, while touching her chin like she was contemplating something. Kale's eyes twitched. Bathing a newborn baby in a pool of dragon's blood is just as freaky, even by Valyrian standards. But they are the only ones that can make dragon eggs have at least a 90% chance of hatching, and all of their dragons are bigger than normal ones. Many others tried, but they couldn't really breed dragons of large size like the Malgarons. Have you ever seen the Targaryen dragons? He asked. Not all of them, just the few relevant ones. They don't have many. Only 4 or 5 if I'm not mistaken, she replied. I'm talking about a black one called Balerion. She scoffed. Oh please, everyone heard of that dragon. They sold 1/5 of their land a few years back for Balerion's egg from the Malgarons. To this day, people talk about how they wanted to improve their standing in the freehold and thought that having a bigger dragon would do the job. Well, good luck to them. That beast grew up like a proper Malgaran-bred dragon, and they suffered to keep it well-fed alongside the others. Then Valeric Targaryen died and left the burden to his son. Poor sod. Kale's eyes went wide. Is this the actual backstory of Balerion the Black Dread? Why is it so pathetic? Then he coughed. I'm talking about its size, especially when compared to ours. Well, Balerion would be the same size as Vaenorin. She looked at him and saw his confused face. My dragon, brother. My dragon, she said with an exasperated tone. It's really tough to teach Kale like he is a clueless child. What in the 14th happened to him? And what about mine? He asked with expectations. She grinned. Yours is a tier bigger. It's considered a mid-tiered large-sized dragon. You are lucky that we are rich, otherwise you wouldn't ever be able to feed that beast. And before you ask, dragon sizes have 3 categories and 3 tiers: small, medium and large size, and low, mid and high tier. Vaynerin is low-tiered large size. Why only mid-tiered though? Aren't we rich? Why not go for the biggest one? She started coughing hard after hearing that. Are you fucking crazy? Do you know how hard it is to ride bigger dragons? No one other than the Malgren family can ride those things. I bet that there are less than 10 dragon riders unrelated to the 5th family in the whole freehold that can ride dragons the size of yours. Good luck with that, by the way. Well, fuck. Chapter 3. Future plans. Kaelaris Regalion, head of the 2nd most powerful Dragonlord family, the true heir of the most powerful Valyrian magic, pure blood descendant of a 5,000-year-old family of sorcerers, fire mages, and blood warlocks. It does sound like fiction, doesn't it? After a whole day of explanations, he finally understood the basics of the basics, but instead of going to sleep, he requested his dear sister to show him around their tower. It was huge. Each floor was 20 feet high with spiral stairways going up and down many floors. Honestly, this whole tower made the legendary Red Keep look cute. He found himself on the 2nd floor of the family library. The top 4 floors of the tower were all part of the library. Even the ceiling was open, and there were no doors. Why? Because there were 3 motherfucking dragons resting on top of the tower. The Valyrian freehold held massive respect for the Dragonlord families, and no one dared to steal from them, not even other Dragonlords. The 1st floor was already beautiful. There was a huge circular room that had huge glass windows, and the floor, walls, and pillars were all artistically carved, even the ceilings. In the center of the 1st floor, a huge globe resided. It was a replica of Planetos, although not much in-depth detail was added on areas outside Essos. And around the globe there was a small spiral stairway so he could take a proper look. Even Sithorios is depicted, although not much is added, just a basic shape and empty canvas. To think that all of this knowledge was lost. It does not surprise me that dragon riders managed to map the world so well. No ship can compare with a dragon when it comes to exploration. He could rotate the globe freely, and his gaze stopped on Westeros. The era of Essos is about to set. Where should this dragon land? He couldn't help but grin when he looked at the map of Westeros. After contemplating for a few minutes, he walked down from the globe and found his way to the 2nd floor. It was the same as the 1st floor, but with way more bookshelves, piles of tomes, and well-maintained old scrolls all around the place. The difference was that in the center was a huge hourglass with red sand. The glass itself was finely made and extremely smooth, with finely decorated Valyrian steel caps on each extremity. The hourglass had markings depicting even the minutes. It marked 24 hours. The 3rd floor had what looked like an empty pool. There were no books in this one, and the room was darker than the 2 rooms below. Many Valyrian runes were engraved all around the place, and lines that spread all around the room connected with the central pool. It felt more like this whole room was made to resemble a beating heart with many veins connected to it. There were no books, only many glasses of weird substances on shelves, with weird-looking tables that resembled old but fantasy-like chemistry kits. Mounted on the wall across the entrance there was a sword, a bastard sword with a black leather grip, and a silver-colored guard of 2 dragon heads, one on each side. The pommel was made of the same material as the guard, but was made to look like a detailed dragon claw, holding an egg-shaped blue stone that gave a faint glow. But the most striking part of the sword was the blade. It was crimson red, with the common Valyrian steel markings all over the blade, which reminded him of Damascus steel from his old world. The ancestral sword of Regalion, the one that tasted the blood of thousands of dragons and turned permanently red. Dragonheart? His sister told him about this sword, but seeing it for the first time made him clench his fists. He couldn't accept that he didn't have the talent to wield probably the most ancient and magical sword in this world properly. I will find a way. I have magic. If my parents added dragon's blood to my veins, I can add warrior's talent to my body. Moving away from the sword, he moved to the 4th floor, and this one made him even more in awe than the previous ones. This floor was all about magic knowledge. All of the tomes were old, but he felt something from each one of them, like the magic runes were alive and communicating with him. In the center of the room there was a huge dragon skull, but not like the ones from Valyrian, or any other common Valyrian dragon. This was the skull of the first dragon recorded to be slain. It had black parts that looked like armored pieces in specific areas, and it was hanging from the floor above by 4 massive chains, made of Valyrian steel. There was also a big magnifying glass that was facing the big skull, with a desk right beside it. It just proved how technologically advanced the Valyrians were. While Mir was harvesting gold with their ugly glass products, Valyria could make proper smooth and transparent glasses in curved shapes, and even magnifying glasses. Picture here. No way I will let this fall behind. He spent over 10 hours in that library, exploring, reading, and learning. Much of the knowledge that he saw just seemed easy for him, but taking a closer look, it was not supposed to be easy at all. To him it felt obvious, like 1 + 1 is equal to 2, but looking from an outside perspective, those runes were more complex than JavaScript from his previous world. Magic, he said as his hand glowed a gentle orange color. He couldn't help but laugh. Only 10 hours of reading, and he could already create a rudimentary fire magic in his hand. It didn't actually have flames, just a controlled amount of heat. Let the fucking Targaryens keep the Valyrian saying of fire and blood, because for me, magic is in my veins. He walked down from the highest floors of the tower, going towards his quarters while considering his plans. The Targaryens left too early. It could be that the Dreamer girl didn't know the exact time of the doom. It could be the next year, but could also be the next day. They could have taken way more advantage if they knew how much time they had. He couldn't help but grin, but I do. Walking inside his room, he sat down on his large, comfortable bed. He walked most of the tower and found no banner or heraldry anywhere. It seems that the Valyrians didn't really care about those kinds of things, which made sense. Everyone would have variations of dragon banners anyway. I need to make plans. I won't wait for the last minute to have my people leave this place. He looked outside the window to see the bright lights. No, it was not still daytime, but Valyria was surrounded by lava and fire. Even the night here was bright and warm. 8 to 10 years. I will stay here for 8 to 10 years and slowly sell the excess of things that we won't be taking with us. I won't sell any property, but I will lease the rights to certain mines, he said while looking at the ceiling. These people are not stupid. The Targaryens leaving because of a little girl's dream can be considered a joke, but if the second most powerful family leaves as well, people will start considering things. And I don't want other Dragonlord families to challenge me. They would have numbers over me, even the smallest ones. Looking at the comforting lava rivers through the window beside his bed, he kept thinking, I need an excuse for my absence, and I should also be the last one to leave. My people will leave in batches every week for 8 years. I should leave in 10? 1 year of me being away won't raise any alarms, especially since in 10 years people will completely disregard the Targaryens and forget about them. As for my excuse, he grinned, I have a perfect one. We are from a magic-related family, and my father went south to expand our magical knowledge. I shall do the same, but my target will be the wall. During my time here, I should really learn all I can, gather all the advanced items, technology, crafters, builders, and breeders that I can. I will invest a large sum of gold in buying slaves, to build a new kingdom. Slaves are a must if I don't want to wait 40 to 80 years to see it coming together. Look how long the Targaryens took to finish King's Landing. If they had slaves, Aegon the Conqueror would be still alive by the time they finished. I also need to plan on how to protect myself in Vaila. Our weakness is obvious if one of us dies. There will be no descendant whatsoever. Our ritualistic tendencies made our gene incompatible with others, even Valyrians. I would have to raise a new possible mate from the cradle through rituals if Vaila died. But I'm not that proficient in doing those kinds of complex things. It would probably take me years, probably decades to reach a level that I can safely create a fake regal lion through rituals, and even then, there's no guarantee of success of our genes being compatible. If it was that easy, why would we be so few in numbers through generations? He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. It seems incest is a must in this family. He grinned, power has a price. I already lost my old life anyway. So, let's shock this world. Let's change the rules. After tossing and turning for hours on his bed, not being able to sleep, he finally felt so exhausted that his vision started to get blurry, and one can't blame the man. He was just tossed into a world of magic, dragons, and betrayal, but also endless wonders. Calm yourself down, Kale. One step at a time. Plans change. Finally closing his eyes with a smile on his face, one step at a time. Tomorrow we have work to do. Tomorrow we shall ride a dragon. Chapter 4. Baby Steps. Kale slept like he never slept before. During the whole night he felt like he was floating in the clouds. Suddenly he felt something like a push and his eyes went wide. Strangely, he was not in his bedroom back in Valyria. No, he was in a dreary place, a huge hall. This hall was the biggest place he had ever seen. The walls were made of weird-looking black stone that made it look evil and imposing, but at the same time gave him a faint familiar feeling, a feeling that he felt once he looked outside the balcony of his tower in Valyria, the familiar fused black stone. He walked around the deserted hall. There was absolutely no furniture, and the whole place was empty except there were a few interesting statues made of greasy black stone. The first one was the statue of a toad that reminded him of certain old animes he once saw, but it was not anything anime-like, though it was obviously reminiscent of Asian culture. The black toad was just sitting there, but the one small detail that he saw was a faint, thick green liquid slowly dripping from the toad's mouth. The second statue was even weirder, as this one was a rectangular block of carved black stone, without much detail on it other than a faint blue glow. The third one, however, made him shiver. It was an orb, black as the blackest of nights, with a faint red glowing aura around it. Honestly, it reminded him of the dark sign from Dark Souls, but there were no flames, just the eerie red glow. Before he could move any further, he felt a breeze on his neck. Creeped out and obviously scared, he turned around and saw weird but slightly familiar figures in the shapes of ghosts that lined the great hall, all dressed in what looked like faded raiments of kings. In their hands were swords of pale fire. They had hair of silver and hair of gold and hair of platinum white, and their eyes were opal and amethyst, tourmaline and jade. Magic, one of those ghostly figures said. So close, yet so far, said another one. At this point, Kaelares was completely freaked out. He didn't know what these people were, though he assumed they were ghosts, for crying out loud. He always hated the idea of visions, dreams, and prophecies, the fact that his fate was not in his own hands, but at the hand of gods or whatever superior beings existed. You can escape fate, the third one said. As you will do in a few years, said the fourth and final one. When he finally thought that it would be the end of it, the four ghostly kings took a step further towards him. Their eyes were like ghostly spheres of fire in different colors. He didn't know who they were, but he felt somewhat connected. But you will need more, they all said together before fading away into the distance. Suddenly he looked around, and he wasn't inside a hall anymore, but knees deep inside a nasty green river by a huge mountain range. Not even Valyrian towers were this large. There was no sun. There were no moon, nor stars, only a massive black cloud spreading as far as the eye could see. And when he finally decided to act, he woke up, sweating and exhausted, breathing heavily with his long platinum blonde hair glued to his forehead, and his fancy silvery tunic was drenched in sweat. The doors of his quarters were open before he could take any action, and his sister came to his side. She stared at him with a worried gaze, and for the first time Kaelares saw other Valyrians beside his sister, a bunch of servants with silvery gold hair, but none had the same violet eyes as he and his sister had. My lord, do you wish for us to prepare your bath? One of the maids asked. Kael could only nod absent-mindedly. Are all the Valyrians of old beautiful? He was brought back by his sister's hug. Did you have bad dreams again, brother? He gave her a gentle smile. He was quite happy to have someone that cared. In this world, a person like that is more valuable than gold. He hugged her back. I don't know if I should call it bad, but it felt more like a call, an invitation, he said while looking at the window by his bed. But it did teach me a valuable lesson. Too even. His sister was confused. What lessons? That no plan survives the first contact, and that this world is bigger and more mysterious than I had considered. He thought that being a Valyrian, especially being from one of the top, most powerful, and oldest Valyrian families in this world, meant that they knew pretty much everything that he would ever need. Valyrian steel was the best metal, right? Dragons were the ultimate beasts, right? But no, Valyrians are a mere mark on the pages of this world. This place is bigger, more dangerous, and way more magical than the show or even the books depicted. Getting over his thoughts, he decided to go take his bath and enjoy a good meal afterward. He had to admit, the Valyrian food was beyond anything he ever tasted back in his old world. It was not just about the taste itself, but how good it made him feel. He spent the next few hours reading some tomes on the second floor of the library. He discovered that the hourglass worked on its own, as if powered by magic. He could move the marker on the glass surface to mark how long he wanted the red sand to keep falling until the mechanism locked itself with a loud click sound, alerting him that the time was up. He kept reading about the origins of his family's magic. His sister told him that was from the south, Sothorios, but he doubted it. That place was savage according to the books, but parts of the continent were colonized a long time ago, and he was not talking about the old empire of guys. Those slavers were just taking over a power vacuum that was left in the land. They had numbers and magic, yes, but even their magic had to come from somewhere, because different from Valyrians, they had no dragons, and dragons are known as children of magic. He kept reading and reading until his eyes finally went wide, and his violet irises glowed like powerful gems empowered by magic. He had a clue. Not really a clue itself, but just a small hint. An old empire that has barely any reliable records anymore. An empire that was believed to be the source of dragons and magic, and if his theories were right, his bloodline is a direct descendant of that empire. According to his dream, those ghosts had Valyrian traits, but they were no Valyrians, not unless the Valyrians themselves came from somewhere else. He heard the click of the hourglass and closed the tome after marking the page, deciding to follow his plans for today, but not before going to the globe replica of Planitos and leaving 2 magnet-like marks on 2 locations. After giving one final look at the library, getting over the wish to stay longer, he left. There is time. I have plenty of time to discover the mysteries of this world. Walking downstairs, he found a huge patio in front of his family tower. He never noticed how vast his lands were. There were many huge towers in the distance, but his lone tower stood out in front of 2 volcanoes like a sore thumb, alone and desolated of civilization. Only his family dragons flew nearby, while others avoided his land. It seems we own 2 of the 14-foot, he smirked, powerful second indeed. My lord, said a loud, strong voice. Looking back, Cale saw a huge man. He looked to be in his 40s. He had long black hair with streaks of silver and a trimmed, well-kept beard. His eyes were pale silver. He was equipped in what looked like leather gambeson, colored black with dark gray sleeves that had a small metallic luster. Valyria came close to him and whispered in his ear, "That is Valinor. He is our master of arms and most loyal dragon rider. He never bonded with a dragon, but he is allowed to ride our family dragons in battle. He was one of the few that came back with father. He has no family name, but our father rescued him when he was but a small child." Cale nodded. "Hello there, Valinor. It's been a while." He knew that he didn't know who Valinor was, but his sister told him he was beaten by the master of arms when trying to learn the sword. "Yes, my lord. It saddens me that you gave up on your sword practices so soon." He gave a teasing smirk that made Cale's lips twitch. "Don't worry. I will restart my old routine soon, and I will make sure to beat the shit out of you." Valinor gave a powerful laugh. "Ha ha, good. That's the spirit, my lord. But why don't we start with an easier task first? Like riding one of the biggest dragons in the freehold. A size so big that you could count on your fingers how many are capable of achieving such a feat." Cale's eyes twitched. Asshole. Before he could have his comeback, Valinor shouted to the slaves behind him, "Bring the saddle." Then he started to chuckle, trying to hold back his laugh, and the protection? That raised one of Caleri's eyebrows because even his sweet cute little sister was holding back her laugh as well. What the fuck? Then he saw a huge saddle made of some kind of extremely thick leather. This thing was huge, like really huge. The leather was black with gold trimmings, the seat had a cushion, and it was red in color. "At least I will be more comfortable than Daenerys." He turned to his sister and whispered in her ear, "Will this leather be able to withstand a dragon's flight?" She looked at him like he was an idiot. "Of course, brother. It is made of dragon hide." He was surprised. Dragon hide? I thought dragons had scales. She let out an exhausted sigh, looking at the sky as if she was asking the gods why. Then she turned to him. "Their wings, brother. Their wings?" Oh, he finally understood, huh? Well, he always was a bit slow. At least now it's a cute slow. Then came long chains made of Valyrian steel, and when Valinor and Valyria saw those, they couldn't hold it in anymore and started to laugh. Ha 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 ha. Cale was getting annoyed by this, but before he could even complain, or even ask what the fuck was going on, and what was so funny, a loud roar echoed through the land. It shook the ground and even the tower. Smaller dragons all flew away as fast as they could, and even the laughs stopped as the beast had arrived. A massive dragon with blood-red scales, blazing green eyes that seemed to glow even under the sunlight, plus 2 ivory horns that curved backward, almost as long as the dragon's head, and a sharp bone came from its nose, almost as if a third horn, but not properly developed. Its teeth were the size of a grown man's leg, honestly. Cale almost shat his pants when he saw the beast staring him dead in the eyes. Right away, a couple of dragon speakers came beside the Crimson Calamity and started shouting, "Dohiras." It took a while for the dragon to calm down enough to allow the slaves to equip it with the saddle. Father spared no expenses on that saddle. "It's probably the best saddle in the freehold. Don't ruin it, dear brother," said Valyria with a teasing chuckle. Aye, very funny. Valinor shouted, "Lock the chains," and the slaves added the Valyrian steel chains to the grip of the saddle, on a hole that was made specifically for that. Caleri still didn't get it. What the fuck was so funny? That was until one of the slaves approached him with its head low and requested permission. After nodding, the slave equipped him with a belt that looked like a climber's harness. Then it finally clicked. These things are the training wheels for riding dragons. He looked around and all his immediate vassals were avoiding his gaze, holding back their laughs because of the sight. It was like he was wearing thick, black leathery diapers. You motherfuckers. Chapter 5, Dragonfire. After everyone had a good amount of laughs, Vaila approached Kale with a slightly worried gaze. After gently touching his arm, she spoke. Brother, remember that dragons are prideful and intelligent. They are not just beasts. The small ones are easy to tame because of their size, but the bigger the dragon, the more they like to test their rider. Don't get arrogant and get yourself hurt. Kale nodded solemnly. I don't want to face death this early in life. As embarrassing as this protection might be, I would rather bear the shame than face death. Everyone stepped away as Kaleri slowly climbed up the dragon's wing. The big red creature didn't mind though. They were bonded and it knew it very well, but it didn't change the fact that it wanted to test the rider regardless. After sitting on the saddle, Kale quickly locked the chain to the leather diaper that he was wearing and held the handle of the seat like his life depended on it. Ready as you are, big guy, he said jokingly. The dragon roared to the sky. Everyone covered their ears with their hands, and after a powerful thrust, the dragon took flight at high speed, not caring at all for the massive crowd below that was sent flying. Grrr Kale used all his strength to keep his hold on the saddle, and he clenched his thighs around the seat as hard as he could. Seeing that the rider managed to keep up with the takeoff, the dragon first started with simple maneuvers, leaning sideways, speeding up, slowing down, but Kale was like glue. He didn't let go. But he also was treating the ride wrongly. The dragon didn't like what it was seeing. With a powerful flap of its wings, the dragon went a full 90 degrees and soared up like a rocket. With every flap of its wings, the speed increased bit by bit. Kale's legs had long since lost their strength and now were dangling down. He was not even sitting anymore. If it wasn't for the fact that he was holding the handle for his dear life, he would have been long left behind, dragged by the chain. As the dragon darted upwards, the people below kept watching with pale faces, especially Vaila. Those kinds of movements were impossible for any dragon rider. It was not just the speed, but the angle, the wind, and the pressure. This is too much, she shouted and started running towards an empty area. My lady, you can't interfere. One of the dragon speakers tried to reason. Nonsense. No one would survive such maneuver, not even father, and he was the best dragon rider I've known, she interrupted, extremely worried. After reaching the empty area of the patio, she shouted, Vainarin. A roar echoed and a massive blue dragon with ruby red eyes came flying from one of the volcanoes, different from the red one. This one was graceful. Instead of bulky and heavy muscles, this was more slim and agile. As the dragon landed, she ran up its wings and sat down on the saddle that was already equipped. Once bounded and tamed, the saddle wouldn't be removed, unless a new one would be equipped or the bond ended. In that case, the dragon itself would try to bite it off. They knew when their rider died. She sat down, held it tight, and spoke, Let's follow my brother. Valid. The blue dragon took off and flew towards the red one. It didn't quite go on the same angle because it would be impossible for its rider to keep her hold, and also didn't go as fast for the same reason. The red dragon, seeing the blue dragon take off, snorted, and once it reached high in the sky, it did a complete 180 degrees forward and plummeted like a meteor. Arghu bastard, yelled Kale. Because of the change, he lost his grip and was flung back. Luckily, he was wearing the protection chain, otherwise, he would have been long gone. Looking behind its wings subtly, the dragon saw its rider holding tight on the chain, using his hands to pull his way back towards the saddle, climbing up, or rather down, the chain like it was a rope. A glint of acceptance appeared in the dragon's eyes, but it wasn't done yet. It kept plummeting toward the sea at high speed. You motherfucker, yelled Kale, I will turn you into my little bitch. He kept using all his strength and slowly made his way to the saddle. But before he could grab it again, the dragon stabilized its flight, going now parallel to the ocean below. The change in directions once again threw Kaleri's backward. It was at this moment that he heard a very concerning sound. RIIP looking down, he saw that the safety belt wasn't able to withstand the treatment, and for the first time the fear of death appeared in his eyes. No. At this moment, a blue dragon appeared nearby with Vaila on its back. She got there just in time to watch the protection belt be ripped apart. No! She shouted with all her lungs. Even her dragon roared loudly. That seemed to have woken up the red dragon from whatever it was doing. It looked back over its shoulders, and at that moment even the dragon's eyes widened. Kale held the chain firmly on its left hand, clenching his jaw and with bloodshot eyes. The safety belt was only rags around his hip. The big red dragon was about to slow down for the safety of its rider. It didn't want to kill Kale. It wanted to test him. Not only that, it wanted Kale to enjoy the flight as it did. The safety belt was the first thing that made the dragon fly like this. It didn't like it. Dragons were free creatures, and this one particular dragon wanted its rider to feel as free as it did when they fly together. How one can be free if they are tied to chains? How can one enjoy the pleasure of flying if all they think of is the fear of falling? But before it could slow down, its big dragon eye captured something. Something that shook the dragon's very soul. Kale's pupils turned into a thin reptilian line. His clenched mouth started to emanate smoke and wisps of fire, and his irises started glowing violet purple. One pull at a time, Kale kept forcing his way back to the dragon. Without the belt, it was a do-or-die situation now, and he will use everything he has to survive. Viola, seeing this happening, couldn't even move. She was completely shocked. It should be impossible to keep a hold of the chains with his bare hands like that, the pressure and speed. Not considering the massive amount of physical strength needed to accomplish this was absurd. Then she saw wisps of fire coming out of her brother's lips, as well from the chain. Every time he grabbed a link of the chain, it was burning, leaving fiery handprints behind. Once he finally reached the saddle, he sat down like a proper rider, discarding the chain. He held his head high, staring at the eyes of the beast. During the whole flight he was feeling worry, apprehension, fear, anger, and even shame. But once he managed to sit down like a proper rider, all he felt was being free. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He looked upwards and roared like a dragon. Fire came out of his mouth like proper dragon breath. The red dragon felt pride and joy. Finally, it had a worthy rider. Following its rider's example, it looked upwards mid-flight and roared. Ugh. Many small dragons nearby felt fear from that roar. Emerald green flames came out of the crimson beast like a tidal wave of wildfire. The blue dragon nearby followed suit and roared as well, spitting out its own flame to the sky. Everyone down below was shocked. Valinor went down on his knees with tears in his eyes. The late Lord Valyria's regal lion once told him that he had a vision that their bloodline would rise, that his son was destined to be more than just another dragon rider from the freehold, but to be a proper dragon. A dragon must have a dragon's name. He muttered the words of his late lord to himself while watching 3 bursts of flame eclipsing the clouds, 2 massive ones and 1 very small, but it didn't diminish the accomplishment in the sightliest. A bunch of soldiers that served the family arrived at the location to watch their lord taming the mighty beast. Valinor got up and roared, "Dragon's blood." The massive wave soldiers that came to watch the whole thing shouted in return, "Dragon's might." Once the dragons landed, and they saw Kalares climbing down from the saddle, Valinor went on one knee, which was followed by all the soldiers in the vicinity. All hail Lord Kalares, Dragonfire, Regal Lion. Chapter 6. Price of Magic. Kale slowly opened his eyes. They felt heavy, like a force was preventing him from actually waking up. At first, his vision was blurred. He couldn't identify shapes or colors, though as the seconds passed, he finally saw where he was. Looking around, he found himself in a comfortable bed. He didn't remember how he got here at all, but he saw people moving around. They were a familiar tall, bulky man with black hair that had strands of silver mixed in and a gorgeous-looking young woman with long platinum-colored hair and purple eyes. He could tell they were discussing something. His ears couldn't capture sounds, just like his eyelids could not open at first, and it seemed that his body was reanimating after a long slumber, still getting used to being active again. The two looked at him with worried gazes. Their mouths moved, indicating that they were talking, but no sound could be heard for the first few seconds. "Ord, Lord, my lord," kept saying the man, trying to get his attention. Other, brother," the young woman said, at the same time as the man. Where am I?" He spoke in a low, hoarse tone. His throat was dry and his body felt sore. "Here," said the young woman, giving him a glass of water, which he drank immediately. "How are you feeling, my lord?" said the man with relief in his eyes. Memories came back. He now remembered flying on a big red dragon. He remembered the death that almost claimed him. He remembered looking at the beast in the eye and roaring fire to the skies. He remembered cheers when he landed. And then, "Black? Brother, don't overdo it. Take it slow," the young woman said with a concerned voice. It's fine, sister, but can any of you tell me what happened?" he said. "You landed the dragon. Everyone came to cheer for you. Your eyes were glowing, my lord, but suddenly, you passed out," said the big man. He remembered now. This man is Valinor. We brought you in. But after 2 days you didn't wake up? We were very worried, said his sister Vaila. 2 days? Damn, that's a long sleep. He noticed his arms were fully bandaged, from below his shoulders all the way to his hands, leaving only his fingertips visible. What happened to my arms? He asked. You overdid it, my lord. Your muscles were pushed too far. We called the healers to take a look. They used healing balm all over your arms and bandaged them. Every 5 hours since then we have been reapplying the balm and bandaging your arms again, said Valinor. He felt light, extremely light, but at the same time, terrifyingly weak. Looking around he spotted a mirror on the wall. Following his gaze, Vaila saw what he was looking at, but she was a bit worried about letting him see the mirror right now. Sister, can you bring that mirror over here, please? He asked softly. Vaila didn't know how to reply. Let me do it, my lady, said Valinor. He needs to know. The man stood up and brought the mirror back to the bed and faced it against Kale so he could see his reflection. Kale gasped. He looked thin, extremely thin, almost just bones and skin. His cheeks were sunken in his face. His handsome, confident self was replaced by a skinny, sickly-looking visage. His eyes felt too big for his face. His lips were dried and his hair had lost its luster. How did this happen? He asked, in shock and panic. My lord, we invited many Magi to come here and check on your condition, and all of them said you used magic beyond the bounds of humans. When I explained to them what I saw that day, they gasped. Most of them ran away from here scared, but an old Valyrian Magi was interested in your situation. She is still around, and said that it would be a miracle for you to wake up ever again. Kale sat there, thinking about those words. Of course, magic has a price. Nothing is free in this damn world. He looked towards his favorite window by his bed, watching the sun setting on the horizon. But why do I feel wrong? He frowned. He didn't really understand what he was feeling. He couldn't really put it into words. It was more like something on the back of his head constantly making him feel uncomfortable. He turned to his sister. You didn't let her inside my library, did you? He asked with a worried face. She, in turn, shook her head. Of course not, brother. No outsider is welcome in the top 10 floors of the tower. Not even Valinor here can go there. We placed some of our trusty guards to guard the stairways. Don't worry. Kale nodded. Can you call this old Magi woman for me? Vaila and Valinor looked at one another in confusion, but nodded to him. Stay here, my lord. I will let your men bring her in here. I shall stay here by your side to protect you at all times, Valinor said solemnly. Kale chuckled. It seems that I already have a very fierce and loyal Kingsguard. As they waited, Vaila helped Kale to comb his hair and used some wet and dry towels to clean his face, neck, and chest. She didn't look shy by one bit. She was even enjoying it, doing it with a warm smile on her full lips. After waiting for several minutes, they heard a knock on the door. An old woman entered the room. She had long silver-white hair, braided over her shoulders, cascading in front of her chest, and she wore fine black and silver robes, with many pouches on her waist. Her eyes, though, were almost white. Once she saw him, she was shocked. It was like she was seeing something challenging the natural laws of the world right in front of her. It should have been impossible for you to wake up. Valinor didn't like what he heard and instantly unsheathed his Valyrian steel sword. Calm down, Valinor, Kale said while frowning. Let her explain. Noticing how ambiguous her words were, the old Magi bowed her head. I apologize, my lord, for my words were hasty and I didn't realize it. Kale simply nodded, but Valinor didn't put his sword back in the sheath. He kept staring at her like a hawk. I see. Care to explain to me your words, then? Said Kale. He didn't like her either. Her first words already made that feeling he was having on the back of his head intensify. She nodded but didn't approach, afraid that one step was all it needed for her head to fall from her shoulders. If what your vassals told me is true, then what you achieved a few days ago should have been an impossible task. Breathing fire through one's mouth should be impossible. Magic requires external tools to be wielded. It's an external source of power, like a sword, but yours came from within, she explained. That made Kale raise an eyebrow. He didn't feel that it was right. Magic requires an outside force to be able to be executed. You might be familiar with the Red Priests of Lawlor. They are very famous for wielding fire. But even them, one of the oldest religions known, require the external force of their red god to be able to utilize these powers. The woman concluded. Kale scoffed. From what he saw in the books and in the show, he didn't like that religion at all. In fact, he didn't like any religion. The most acceptable one was the old gods of the north. I don't believe in this god. If you came here to preach, you may leave. I refuse to believe that I need to sell my soul to some entity for the sake of owning magic. My family has been practicing fire magic for thousands of years. I need no ruler. She nodded. I didn't come to preach, my lord. But as I said, it wasn't an external force. It came from within you. But the most absurd part is, that was no ordinary fire magic. That was dragon fire. No human can withstand that amount of power, or at least no human should be able to. She concluded, eyeing him up and down. But you did, and the most terrifying part is, you survived. Vaila frowned at those words. Are you sure that the flames that came out of my brother that day were actual dragon fire? The Magi nodded. If the other dragons recognized and breathed their own fire in the air, as you have told me, then yes, it was indeed dragon fire. Valinor was lost, although he didn't show it. Honestly, he didn't understand why Lady Vaila was frowning. Having his liege able to breathe the same flames as dragons should be a reason to celebrate. His new title is Dragonfire after all, nothing more fitting than having actual dragon flames instead of just regular ones. Kale looked at his sister with a questioning gaze. Vaila noticed it and replied, our family is known to use fire magic for thousands of years. Even I can conjure regular flames in my hands and wield them in combat if needed. It took me years to learn it. We were born different, and you know that, brother. We need no ruler. But there was never a record of one of us being able to wield proper dragon fire. No human body should be able to withstand such power and heat on its own. Even our ancestors managed to wield the flames of dragons by controlling the dragon breath of their companions. They never created them on their own. Kale frowned again. But why did I end up like this? The Magi interjected. Every magic needs fuel, my lord. Simple fire magic can be done without much consequence considering the blood in your veins. What you did, however, must have cost you something tremendous. We can't be sure since, as the lady said, there are no records of it. But one can assume that your body burned its own fat in order to keep you alive. I would call it a miracle. The three nodded, and the old Magi was excused so she could leave. Dragonfire, huh? I thought the title we gave you was a bit extravagant. But who would have thought? Valinor couldn't help but chuckle. Vaila eyed him. Don't be mad at me, my lady. He is alive, and whatever happened, happened. All he needs is a few weeks of rest and good food. He will be back to his past handsome self. He said the first part with an apologizing tone, but finished sarcastically. Even Kalares couldn't help but chuckle at that. They kept talking for a while, to make sure Kale was feeling all right. Once it was dark, Vaila left his chambers while Valinor stood by his side like a watchful protector, and he vowed to only leave once his lord was back to his peak. As Vaila was walking around the tower, she entered the library. She was curious to see what her brother was reading before, which might give her a clue about how he did what he did. She was about to go to the second floor of the library when she noticed two magnetic marks on the replica of Planitos in the center of the room. Letting her curiosity take over her, she approached it, climbed the stairs around the globe, and used her soft hands to gently spin it so she could see better. Why did brother mark this island on the west? Then she kept spinning the big globe, trying to find the other one. Once she did, she frowned. Why did he mark this place? Walking down the stairs, she decided to leave the library. A deep frown was constant on her pretty face. Why did he mark Ashai by the shadow? Chapter 7. Recovery and Research. For the next 2 weeks, Kale locked himself inside the library, looking for old books on religion and magic. Religion in Planitos is directly tied to magic after all. Most, if not all, magic known is related somewhat to some entity, force, or unknown being that grants humans extraordinary powers. All of them except Valyrians, which made Kale's eyebrow raise. Valyria has so many gods, more than any other civilization known, but even so, not a single Valyrian ties their magic to their religion. Valyrian magic is based on dragons, but are not bound to them. The source is the 14 volcanoes that surround our land. After researching deeply for days, only stopping to eat at least 5 times a day, sleep, bathe, and do other private activities, Kale uncovered something very interesting from the old archives in the library of his forefathers. With a thick old tome in his hand, Kale kept reading. To accept an external source of magic is to bind their fate to the source. Once the source is gone, the power will be no more, and with it all the bound souls. He frowned. This explains why the Valyrian magic is bound to the 14. They existed for thousands of years and easily outlast any dragon by a long shot. They can't be killed either, unlike a dragon. For Valyrians, the 14 are an obvious choice. Who would ever guess that those volcanoes would explode, leading to our doom, right? He chuckled at the thought. Binding to a magic source and binding to a dragon is not the same. Us and dragons are akin to Northmen and skin-changing. Well, not really, but close. We can roughly communicate through emotions, kind of like John and Ghost did in the series. It's like binding our blood. He kept tapping his finger on the finely carved desk while drinking Valyrian wine, deep in his thoughts. But binding magic means binding one's soul. Magic in this world is very linked to the soul, which would explain how the others use their mojo, and how R'hllor can bring back the dead. Of course, he had already uncovered that R'hllor could not really resurrect the dead. There's no power greater than life in this world. Instead, what they did was bring back an echo of the diseased former self to take over an already dead body. Shadow binding, that echo must be a shadow left behind by the soul. And the shadow inhabits the husk. That's why in the series and books, Beric Dondarrion said to always come back feeling lesser. He slid the big tome sideways and brought over an old and small dragon leather notebook. It was a diary, written by one of his ancestors named Jaelar Regalion, the First Flame. Different from old and wicked methods of magic attunement, Regalion's magic comes from our own flame, a flame that was inserted in us from birth. Our rituals make our magic unique, not bound to anyone's will or existence outside our own. And according to the priests and sorcerers that I've met, dangerous, they said. It seems to be that some of our forefathers adventured in the Shadowlands to uncover mysteries. It's amusing that priests and shadowbinders call our magic dangerous. It seems that anything that they can't control is considered dangerous to them, typical of cults. The doom of Valyria, natural cause, or a conspiracy from higher powers that failed to control the biggest empire in Planedo since the last long night? According to the Red Priests, R'hllor is the god of fire, of all sources of fire. If so, why would the god of fire allow the 14th to erupt like that and destroy the biggest fire-worshipping empire that existed along with dragons that are said to be made of fire and magic? Unless Valyrian fire magic eclipsed R'hllor's, to the point that it was taking away its domain, or something like that. The Church of the Red God was one of the biggest parties that ended up profiting from the doom. They gained the monopoly over fire magic, and pyromancy became synonymous with R'hllor. As for why the Targaryens were warned, they know no magic. They were a lesser Dragonlord family, and they can't even forge Valyrian steel. With only a few dragons, they were nothing that could challenge R'hllor's domain. The Dreamer Girl could have been a target of some sorcerer like Kaith. She could control Daenerys' dreams through glass candles. R'hllor is the god of visions as well. Mayhaps they were a necessary evil for some greater plan. Taking a deep breath, he closed the tomes, already feeling a headache at this point. So many possibilities. That damn old man didn't finish the fucking books, and now here I am, burning my brain cells trying to find a needle in a haystack. I hope you burn in hell, together with the bastard that created mosquitoes and the asshole that came up with taxes. Suddenly he heard a few knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Kale, I'm coming in, said a melodious female voice. This made him smile. Her presence lifted his mood a lot. And in the 2 weeks that he has been living in this world, his interactions with her always made him happy. At first, he felt awkward. She kept calling him brother, and although he answered in kind, he felt like a liar since he wasn't exactly her brother. She noticed that too, and many times he saw her trying to cover a sad face with a smile for his sake. That was until they talked. In that talk, Kale admitted to Vaila that he was actually happy that he lost his memories of her and could start fresh. When asked why, he told her that if he still had those memories, even after they marry, he would always see her as sister first and wife second. But now that he has no memories, he can see her only as his woman instead. That made her extremely happy, and since that day they have been calling each other nicknames instead of brother and sister. "V, what can I do for you today?" he said with a smile. She raised an eyebrow. "You forgot, didn't you?" Kale's confused face was all the answer she needed. She chuckled. "Today is the day that you told us that we would be leaving our lands to go visit the Targaryens. Everyone is waiting for you." Was all he could say. Damn. Talking about the devil, and he shall appear. He chuckled, and she got confused. "Nothing, V. It's just that I was thinking about them before you came in." He got up, and with the help of his newly crafted dragonbone cane, he walked towards her. 2 weeks helped him recover a lot, but he wasn't back at his peak yet. At least he could walk on his own now with some little aid. Back in the first days, he needed to be dragged around in a wheelchair. Yes, Valyrians had those. Shocking, isn't it? As they walked down the stairs slowly, she couldn't help but comment. "It's shocking how fast you are recovering. Many people who got maimed by abusing magic and survived would be bedridden for years, or even worse." The rest of their lives, she said with a smirk. I have the blood of the dragons in my veins, literally even. He chuckled, and I take offense to that. I never got maimed. She chuckled as well. And what would you call your condition then? He thought for a moment. How about an exaggerated fasting? They both burst out laughing, and the rest of their trip downstairs was filled with jabs and jokes at one another. Life was good in the freehold. Once they exited the tower, they were greeted by a huge entourage of Regal Lion soldiers and some slaves. The slaves were carrying a big and well-carved palanquin with a comfortable soft sofa chair inside. Cale's eye twitched, and he turned to Valinor, who had come to help him, and said, I didn't lose my legs. I can walk, and you know it. Valinor chuckled. Of course you can, my lord. But if we were to wait for you to catch up, the Targaryens would be long gone by the time we arrive there. Vaila started tearing up. Ha 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 ha. Cale stared deep into Valinor's eyes. He saw that amused smirk on his face. I want to bash his face in so hard. After taking a deep breath, and with some help, he climbed up and sat down on the sofa chair. You know, Valinor, most lords would punish their vassals hard if they heard them talking like that to them. Valinor nodded. My lord, that is correct. But again, most lords don't have someone as loyal and skilled as myself in their host, he said with the same amused smirk on his lips. Giving up and letting out an exasperated sigh, he could only let it go. The truth was that he liked Valinor. He was the closest thing to an older brother he ever had. He was loyal, fierce, extremely skilled, could ride an unbound dragon without having pure Valyrian blood, and always placed his own safety and life second when it came to the Regal Lion family. Valinor turned around to the big host of soldiers and shouted, All right, let's go visit some wormlings. Depart. Everyone laughed. Even the slaves had to hold back their smiles. Cale couldn't stop his laugh after hearing that. It's so funny when I'm not the target of his jabs. Can't hate the man. Chapter 8. Targaryen. During the trip towards the last of the Targaryen lands, Caleres kept quiet inside his palanquin. Valyria could be said to be the closest thing to a utopia of magic, but as long as it was ruled by humans, it was bound to have conflicts. Dragonlords were no different from Westerosi lords in many aspects. Every single one of them wanted to one-up the other, and the Targaryens were no different. The rules may be different, but the people are the same. If I could, I would bet my money that they are pissed at the Valyrians for calling them cowards and ridiculing them. And now that they have nothing to lose because they are exiling themselves, nothing prevents some hot-headed idiot from picking a fight. My lord, a voice came from outside. Yes, Valinor, speak up, he answered in a calm, low tone. You can bet that the tales of your circumstances have reached them. They might try to pressure you into a duel to earn more riches for their future endeavors, he said. Cale chuckled. No Valyrian would demand a duel for a petty reason. They would be shunned by the whole freehold. My lord, but these wormlings are leaving the freehold. Considering how desperate they were selling their things as fast as possible, one can believe that they might try to increase their fortune by unorthodox means, just as I thought. Cale thought, I understand, Valinor. Just don't let them bait you to call for a duel. I will fight for you if they try anything funny. He spoke solemnly, but then chuckled and added, I always wanted to taste wormling's blood with my revenant. I wonder if it will turn red like your dragon heart? Or does it need high-quality dragon's blood for that? Cale smirked at that, but his eyes narrowed. It's time to meet other dragons. They arrived at a huge port that looked more like an open castle, with white long docks, crafted of finely fused stone that made them look otherworldly and magical. The personnel were organized, and many vessels with different sails were being loaded and unloaded. Long cranes, made of carved wood and metal, helped the workers. On the horizon, leaving the bay, one could see a castle over the water. The size was small when compared to other castles. It was but a small keep, but it was built on top of an archway that served as a gate for the vessels. Every ship that entered or left this place would go through that gate. It was called the Western Water Gate. On a corner, a group of 6 to 7 platinum-haired people were gathered, ordering their soldiers and workers to load a couple of massive ships. If Cale had to guess, he would assume that those would be their actual family ships, while the soldiers would be sent on smaller ones. Or, mayhaps most of their soldiers are already in Dragonstone by now. One of them noticed the Regal Lion host arriving and called for the others. There were 3 small kids among the group, one girl of roughly 6 and 10 named days old, a small boy of only 10, and another one even younger, around 6 or 7. The grown-ups had different hairstyles of different lengths. One was thinner, and one was bulkier. One was smart-looking, and the other was battle-hardened. The third, however, was a woman. She was pretty and had a fierce but collected air around her. As Cale judged their host, they also judged his. Who's that, brother? Asked a thin Valyrian man. He had straight platinum blonde hair and deep lilac eyes. Another one that came to mock us. He spat on the floor in anger. The tall, handsome, and smart-looking one kept his gaze on the palanquin. I don't think so. But considering their numbers, they are no lesser family. They are one of the 40. The thin man smirked. Oh great, we might earn something out of this. The tall man grunted. JLR? What? The thin man, JLR, shrugged. They don't seem very powerful. Only one small palanquin. Dragonlords usually ride their dragons around. So, it's someone sick or some family that is already screwed. As the incoming host stopped, the tall, handsome man with short platinum hair and bright lilac eyes approached the palanquin. Fire and blood friend. I am Enar, lord of the Dragonlord family of Targaryen. He introduced himself cordially, offering the peaceful greetings used among the Dragonlord families. Fire and blood, Lord Enar Targaryen. My name is Valinor and I came with my liege. He wishes to speak with you and your daughter, replied Valinor in kind. Although he teased, he knew that Kale didn't come here to wreak havoc. Enar nodded, and basic amiable greetings were exchanged so. According to Valyrian culture, they came on friendly terms. With all due respect, Valinor, whom is your lord? Asked Jaelier, intruding on the conversation, which earned him a solemn look from his brother. A solemn and calm voice came from the palanquin. I am Kalares, lord of the sacred Dragonlord family of Regal Lion. As the Targaryens heard those words, their eyes went wide. They are a small family and never actually met anyone from the big sacred 5 families in person. They knew of them, obviously, but to meet one? Ha! It was as unlikely as Dunk meeting Egg, but again, everything related to Egg is unlikely, including his moniker. Enar straightened his back. He respected the sacred 5 dearly. They were the pillars of Valyria and the only families capable of forging Valyrian steel. Also, they knew magic that no one could even understand, especially the Regal Lions that were the most mystical family in the Freehold. Jaelar, on the other hand, had a weird gleam in his eyes. He also adjusted his posture, but something about him was off, and his brother noticed. A man came out from the palanquin. He dressed in long black robes that slid across the floor as he walked. The inner part of the robes was red and had many silver-colored ornaments. But looking closely, one could see weird patterns on those silver-colored ornaments. Valyrian steel. Both Enar and Jaelar Targaryen thought at the same time. They were scrapping for a couple of Valyrian steel swords, and this lord in front of them used that rare magic metal for ornaments and jewelry. Even his cane was made of dragonbone with Valyrian steel. How rich and powerful those sacred 5 really were. Jaelar kept staring at the young man that approached. He looked handsome with his long platinum hair and bright amethyst eyes, but he was pale and slightly sick-looking. Oh, so it's him, the famous Regal Lion Dragonfire. Enar, on the other hand, paid attention to small details. He noticed that every time the cane hit the ground, small embers spread. He looked sick and weakened, as the rumors said, but even weakened, he is like a real dragon. Well met, Lord Regal Lion. It's an honor to meet you. I've heard a lot of things about you, said Enar respectfully. Kale smiled. Well met, Lord Targaryen. It's an honor to meet you as well. I also could say that I heard quite a bit about your family, but I don't think you would take that in a positive light. Enar could only smile bitterly. My lord. Rumors got out of hand and now we are, well, in an awkward situation. Kale nodded but looked around, towards the 2 big vessels. Rumors, you say? I don't think calling it rumors would be fitting, not when you are equipping your own ships to leave this place. Enar could only chuckle after everything that happened. It's not like we have a choice. We either move or endure the mockery. Kale narrowed his eyes. He is downplaying the impact of his daughter's dreams. Is he intentionally doing it so I don't take it seriously, or was he really forced into this situation and is not happy with the outcome? I was wondering if I would have the pleasure to meet your new dragon. I heard its name was Balerion, a very good name. It honors our gods. Kale decided to move on. Showing doubt right now would be counterproductive. He was here to strike a deal after all. Enar nodded. Yes, my lord, Balerion is still growing up. He is a beast like no other, at least for us. He eats as much as our other 4 dragons combined. But he is currently sleeping, and we all know to never wake up a dragon from their nap. He finished with a depressed chuckle. Kale raised an eyebrow at that. Since he came to this world, everyone called their dragons, for they were no man. The Targaryen lord understood what Kale meant. We like to believe that dragons are equal to us. Well, at least I do. And I hope my descendants will adopt my belief. Kale was in thought for a few seconds. You know what, Lord Targaryen? You gave me a good new perspective today. Dragons indeed are our companions, and now that you said it, it feels rather degrading to call them it. I thank you for your insight. Einar was happy that one of the Freehold's most powerful lords actually understood and shared his ideals. With a smile on his face, he nodded, my lord, they are our brothers. They talked a bit more about dragons, nothing related to privileged information though, to the dismay of Jaelar that was expecting to get something out of this encounter. Let me introduce you to my family, my lord. This is my brother Jaelar Targaryen. The moment that Kale saw Jaelar, he knew it, found the hot-headed one. Then Einar proceeded to introduce him to his beautiful wife, a mature lady 36 named days old, but she still looked in her 20s. Praise the Valyrian blood. This is my sister and wife Elainis Targaryen. Fire and blood, Lady Targaryen, said Kaelaris with a soft smile. Fire and blood, Lord Regalion, she replied with a gentle smile but bowed her head a bit. Powerful families deserve respect, and she respected the power and traditions of their people. And these, said Einar gesturing to the 3 kids to approach, are my children. The younger one is Reiner, and the middle and heroic-looking one is Gaiman, that earned an embarrassed look from his middle son, which made him chuckle. And this young lady here is my eldest daughter, Daenerys. The one that you probably already know, he said with a bitter smile at the end. Kale couldn't help but chuckle. I like your family, Lord Targaryen, he said as he eyed the 3 kids. Well, 2 kids and a young woman. Fire and blood, he said to the 3 of them. And the 3 of them replied together, fire and blood, my lord. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I don't think you came here just for introductions and to meet us, said Einar. He might be friendly and welcoming, but he was a born leader. You are correct about that, Lord Targaryen. You see, my family is very dedicated to what people call magic, and we tend to research and record many of those things, he said and turned to young Daenerys, and I came here because of her. That raised Einar's eyebrows. I'm sorry, my lord, but little Daenerys is no sorcerer. Kale smiled. Yes, that is true. But dreams, visions, and prophecies can be considered magic, although very hard to study since it's a rather unorthodox type of magic, but it's magic nonetheless. How can I help you then, my lord? Asked Daenerys with a slightly scared expression. It seems that she was already a shy girl before all of the dream things happened, and that made her even more fearful. She looked like a frail porcelain doll that would break at a slight touch. I know that with your family relocating away from the freehold means that I can't really invite you to my family tower and have long conversations about your dreams and visions, he said while looking at her. She was about to reply when Kale continued speaking. But I heard that you wrote a book called Signs and Portents, that is related to your visions. And I wanted to buy that book. Say your price? Chapter 9. Valyrian Customs of Old. Brother, can I speak with you for a minute? Said Jaelar, while eyeing Kale from the corner of his eye. Einar frowned. Sure. He saw his daughter and sons interacting with Kaelaris and couldn't help but smile. They walked a bit far away, a bit hidden from the Regalion host by using the big ships as cover. We got lucky, brother. That sickly boy is interested in the brat's book. Considering that he came here by himself even under that condition, it means that he really wants it. And I mean, really wants it, said Jaelar with a smug smirk. Einar kept frowning. You have been off since their arrival, brother. What are you planning? They are at the top of the freehold's food chain. Are you really going to antagonize them? Jaelar chuckled. Of course not. I'm not that stupid. If Daenerys' dreams are wrong, then we would be antagonizing someone with the power to trample our family. Ease appeared on the Targaryen lord's face. So what do you suggest? Jaelar grinned. What about some Valyrian steel? We only have 2 swords. We could very easily get a third. You must be joking, Jaelar, exclaimed Einar. A Valyrian steel sword for a mere book written by a 6 and 10 named days-old girl? They will contest you out on that. A smug smirk appeared on Jaelar's face. If they contest my offer, it's even better. I can demand a duel to set our rights. The boy is sick, brother. He can't fight. Einar stared into his brother's eyes. What if they just reject the deal without contesting? That means no duel. You can't push a duel without them contesting. And don't forget about that warrior beside Lord Regalion. He is big and seems experienced and skilled. A sly laugh came out of the younger brother's mouth. Ha. Brother, open your eyes. Do you think that boy would come all the way here to just reject my price? No. He wants it and I can see it. He will accept our price in the best-case scenario, or contest our price at the worst. The Targaryen lord didn't like it. I don't agree with your sly approach, brother. That will probably cause tension between our families. We could ask for some Valyrian steel, yes, but a whole sword? That's absurd. Even if you win, our relationship with one of the Sacred Five would be tarnished, and considering their reputation, we won't be able to forge good relationships with bigger families either. JLR just shrugged. Who cares? We are getting out of here anyway. They already mock us. It's impossible for any Dragonlord family to see us in a positive light because of the little girl. And if she is right about her dreams, we get a free sword out of a doomed man that won't be alive to retaliate. Taking a deep breath, Enar nodded. You can't kill their fighter, otherwise they will hunt us down. So you will have to win without going too far. Leave it to me, brother. I've fought at the Valyria daughters for years. I can subdue a man without many injuries. JLR nodded with a serious expression. He didn't want to think about the outcome if he permanently maimed someone from such high status and power. They would be fucked. While the brothers were discussing the possibilities of a contestation battle to earn the most out of their current circumstance, the little dragonlings were pestering Kale with a lot of questions. Is it true that you rode the biggest dragon in the freehold? Asked little Reiner with stars in his eyes. I heard that his wingspan was as big as the city of Tyria, and he spewed wildfire from his mouth. Who cares about the dragon size? Interrupted Gaiman. I've heard that you can spit dragon fire like a real dragon. Is that true? Reiner nodded. Yes, that too. What about wings? We heard that you can unfold dragon wings from your back and fly on your own, and you fought your dragon in the skies to subdue him. Kale's sweat dropped. Goddamn brats. I can't even say anything. He looked at Deenies and saw her considering something. At least one of them is polite enough. He was about to speak when the girl in question interrupted him. Ah, excuse me, Lord Regalion. Is it true that you are the age of my uncle, but because you are partially a dragon you look like you are of my age? She asked. Really? Shouted both boys. I didn't know that. So you really are a dragon. Can you show us your wings? Asked one. He couldn't even notice who of the two little imps. Pretty please, said the other. All he could hear was the laugh of Valinor behind him. The man was tearing up at that and approached him to join their fun chat. Unfortunately, before he could add anything to this amusing conversation, the two Targaryen men came back, and he could see a greedy look in their eyes, especially the thin, long-haired one. I hope we are not interrupting anything, said Lord Enar with a smile. No, father, said the three in unison. Those pricks are so well behaved in front of him, but total brats behind his back, thought Kale. We thought of a price, Lord Regalion, said JLR with a gentle smile, which ironically made him look incredibly sly and untrustworthy. Oh, do tell, as long as the price is fair, we can settle it easily, said Kale while looking at the man. We want a Valyrian steel sword, that's our price, said the Targaryen brother with a smirk. Sneeze. Everyone looked at Valinor, the source of the sound. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt anything? I apologize, my lord. It's just that I am allergic to horseshit, he said with an impeccably innocent face. The Targaryen children giggled, even Deenies. Enar's face didn't change much. A tiny frown appeared, but he controlled it. JLR, on the other hand, eyed him up and down. Why are you intruding on our negotiations, Valinor? This is a talk between lords. Vassals have no say in it, said JLR. Valinor sneezed again. Oops, I apologize again. It seems that it's really nasty today. He then turned to JLR and grinned. This is no talk between lords. It's a talk between the second son of a weak, exiled family and the lord of the second most powerful house in the freehold. But don't let me intrude your negotiations. I don't want to overstep my worth here. JLR obviously got livid. He was never insulted by mere vassals before. Being a member of a Dragonlord family had many perks and most people looked up to them, except stronger families, of course. But calling him the second son was stepping on his toes. He always hated that he was born second. What is your answer then, Lord Regalion? Said Enar, stepping in. He knew that although this Valinor was being incredibly rude, he wasn't wrong. So at least him talking face-to-face with Kalares on this would balance the situation and save his brother's pride. At least a little bit. I can't possibly agree with this price, Lord Targaryen. Valyrian steel is priceless, and you say that it's equivalent to a book written by a 6- and 10-year-old girl about her dreams. It is quite a stretch, isn't it? Replied Kalares. Enar nodded. He was almost certain that the man in front of him wouldn't accept being taken advantage of so easily. Would you like to reject our offer or contest our offer, my lord? At that question, Kalares grinned. You are so obvious, little wormling. I would like to contest it, of course. I came all the way here for the sake of this book. He spoke, which made JLR grin widely. But why don't we increase the wager? He asked. Oh, do tell, my lord, asked Enar, curious, but also a bit reluctant. His adversary here was way more confident than what he expected. A contestation he expected, but a counteroffer? No. If you win the duel, not only I will give you a Valyrian steel sword, but I also will grant you Valyrian steel armor, said Kale with a smile. The Targaryen brother gulped at that. But if I win, I will pay you 1,000 gold honors for the book, which is already a high price. But I also will take Valyrian, as I believed he hasn't bonded yet, being so young and all that. He finished with a wicked grin. The two brothers now went pale. That damn dragon cost their family a fifth of their house riches 5 years ago when their father bought the egg, and now it costs them so much just to keep him fed. Not only that, but that dragon was bred by legendary breeders, and it will grow to be the biggest known dragon in the future, according to Dini's dreams. But at the same time, Valyrian steel armor. Just the concept of it is absurd. Of course, the extra sharpness property of a blade would be useless, but the resistance and weight of such armor would make any knight who wore it to be as agile as a cat and as resistant as a dragon once they entered the battlefield. Jaelar turned to his brother. Let's do it, brother. I am confident that I can win. Enar kept staring at him with a serious gaze for several seconds, considering many outcomes of it. I trust you, brother, he said. He turned to Kale. We accept your terms. My brother will represent the Targaryen family's interest in this duel. Good, nodded Kale as Valinor approached his side. But before his loyal vassal could say a word, he continued. And I shall be representing mine, Kale concluded, to the dismay of Valinor and panic of Enar and his brother. My lord, exclaimed Valinor, you can't. You are sick and weakened, and even if you weren't, your skills with a sword. He decided to keep the rest of it unsaid, but Kale grinned at him, who said I will be using a sword? Valinor got confused. What? A dragon wields no sword? A dragon needs no sword. Chapter 10. Fire and Blood. There was a solemn silence between both parties. The Targaryens were partially panicking. Valinor was sweating and trembling in anger and helplessness. Kale turned to one of his trusted soldiers and demanded, go find an available Deemster nearby to preside over this duel. He then turned to the Targaryens. We shall take 30 minutes before we begin, so we can all prepare. The brothers nodded and went to their group, while Kale and Valinor went back to their host. What in 7 hells are you thinking, my lord? Are you going to use fire magic in a duel? Valinor wasn't happy. Not one bit. Kale shrugged. It says nowhere that I can't use fire magic in a duel. Does it? He smirked. That's because no one can wield magic like that in the freehold outside your family, he exclaimed, exasperated. Well, that's not my problem then. They use their swords, I use my fire, and we will let the gods decide who is wrong and who is right once it ends. Valinor snorted, please. I can smell horseshit from a mile away, my lord. You are not a religious man. Don't give me that. Kale laughed. Well, you were right. But I'm also someone who doesn't like to play other people's games. If I'm on the board, then everyone involved will follow my rules. He chuckled. And shouldn't you have sneezed there? What happened to your allergy? Valinor spat on the floor, probably somewhere alongside your shame. Lost to the world. Then you should thank me. I just cured you of a terrible illness, Kale said while crossing his arms and looking at the Targaryens. Perhaps we could put that powerful nose of yours to a better use. How about hunting? Valinor choked, my lord. With all due respect, you are a fucking cunt, he said weakly. Lord Regalion laughed out loud. I am. In our world, Valinor, cunts tend to live longer. I can't really argue with that. Kale just nodded, and they stood there in silence, waiting for the Deemster to arrive so the duel could start. But I'm curious, my lord, said Valinor suddenly, breaking the peaceful silence. Kale looked at him curiously. You will have to present at least some proof of payment for the duel to be officialized. I know for certain that you have no Valyrian steel armor, and you didn't bring any sword either, so? So? Said Kale while staring at Valinor's sheathed sword on his waist. Valinor followed his gaze back and forth a few times. No, he said weakly, not wanting to believe what his lord was insinuating. Yes. Not my revenant, he shouted. I'm the lord, you are the vassal. By the 14, you really are a cunt. Kale shrugged. It's not like I'm going to lose. But this is my prized sword. I never put it away. Even during my sleep, it's always by my side. I feel incomplete without it. Kale raised one of his eyebrows and smirked wickedly. You need to find yourself a girl, mate. Or perhaps the reason you keep that sword always nearby is that you already found one, and are otherwise incapable of wooing said strumpet. Valinor felt a pain in his chest like he was pierced by a scorpion spear. You are not a eunuch, are you? Of course not. Valinor shouted with all his might. Kale shrugged. Well, who knows? I know that burning young men's parts for the sake of sorcery is a thing in certain places. Valinor wisely decided to ignore his liege's last remark. But he still tried to fire back. I liked you more when you were polite and gentle. So, when I was an easy target for your remarks. Well, things change, my dear friend, and when I start practicing sword again, I will shove one up your ass. Valinor started laughing. I would like to see you try. Watch out for what you wish. Sometimes the bane of men is getting exactly what they want, concluded Kale when he saw his men approaching with a finely dressed Valyrian man. He wore black, white, and silver, long robes very reminiscent of a Roman tunic, but also had a certain medieval beauty to it. As the man approached, he straightened his back. He knew that one of the parties of this duel would be of the mighty regal lion family. I am Deemster Valen. I was informed that a duel for the contestation of a trade agreement was started by two. He took a pause when he saw the Targaryens and narrowed his eyes. Respectable Dragonlord families. Under the law of Valyria, I request both parties to present their proofs of trade. Kale nudged Valinor, which made his eyes twitch and mutter to himself, fucking cunt. Valinor approached Valen from the regal lion side, while Daenerys approached from the Targaryen side. Seeing that everything was in order, Valen continued, now please, the parties not involved, please leave the vicinity so we can proceed. As everyone started moving, Valinor came back. You better not lose. I miss my sword already. Kale grinned. Don't worry. He then raised one of his fists in front of his mouth and coughed. No one noticed anything as they were too far away or not paying attention to such a common movement. But Valinor saw fire coming out of Kale's lips and flowing between his fingers. After coughing, Kale placed his hands behind his back, away from other people's view, except Valinor that was right behind him, and Valinor could see a small chaotic ball of fire splitting in his palm, forming Valyrian-styled runes that went from his wrist to his fingertips. Kale smirked. Don't worry, Valinor. When I'm done, not only will I get that book for free, they will even be happy and even thank me for it. He then proceeded to approach the duel area, away from his host. Jaelar approached from the Targaryen side with his Valyrian steel sword, Dark Sister, already unsheathed. I don't want to hurt you, Lord Regal Lion. We can finish this if you agree to pay my price. Kale simply smiled, which triggered Jaelar quite a bit for not being taken seriously. His opponent didn't even have a sword. You will regret not bringing a sword for a duel between men, he said with contempt. Shaking his head, Kale replied, and you will regret bringing a sword to fight a dragon. Valen looked at both sides and stood back. You may begin. Instantly, Kale raised his hand in a grasping motion towards Jaelar, who prepared to sidestep at moment's notice. He too had heard the tales of the dragonfire. Once nothing happened, Jaelar grinned and charged forward. As Kale saw Jaelar charging, he smirked and took 2 steps backward, and then just waited with his hand still doing the same grasping motion. Jaelar took 2 steps. On the third, he faltered and fell on the ground, panting. What have you done to me? He said while feeling pain in his chest, his long platinum hair falling all over his face, masking his expression of pain. Dragonlords like to say that they have the blood of the dragons, but the truth is despise having the blood of dragons. Unfortunately, they can't breathe fire like one, Kale said with a sinister smirk. Jaelar started coughing hard. Smoke started coming out of his mouth. He dropped Dark Sister and felt endless pain inside his chest. He couldn't talk. Eventually, a couple of wisps of fire came out of his mouth. So, I generously give it to you, Targaryen. Now you have both fire and blood. Kale grinned but didn't approach. He wasn't dumb. One lunge and he was dead. He won't play the Oberyn Martell here. Lord Regalian, we yield. Please show mercy, shouted Enar from behind, holding himself to not charge into the duel arena to save his brother. Once Kale heard Enar's shout, he stood his hand. The magic stopped working and Jaelar finally felt relief. The pain in his chest slowly eased. It still felt awful, but it was getting better slowly. Lord Targaryen charged toward Jaelar to help him, but he kept staring at Kalares with a frown. To think you would use magic in a duel. Kalares stared back at him. A knight wields a sword. A dragon wields fire. I went easy on him. I could have blasted his body with dragon fire, but I didn't. His words were true but didn't ease Enar's frown. But I agree with you. Enar raised his eyebrows at those words. Using magic in a duel shouldn't be allowed. Well, outside my family no one else can actually do it, so it's no wonder it's not regulated. But I do feel that I went too far with it, so how about we settle it like this? Kale took a pause and stared at Enar's reaction. The man obviously wasn't as aggressive towards him as before. Then he continued. You can keep Valyrian. I don't want to take advantage of your family considering your current situation, and by what I saw in your eyes, You care about your dragons like no other Dragonlord family I've met, but I will take the book for free, and we are settled. How about that? Enar's expression brightened, and he nodded. I accept your terms, Lord Regal Lion. Thank you for your generosity. Kaelaris smiled back at him, and he will be fine in a couple of hours. Give him some water. It will help, he concluded, turning towards Valen, who watched the whole ordeal with a gobsmacked expression, while holding both the sword and the book. May I take them, esteemed Deemster? He asked politely. Oh yes. Here, my lord, you fought bravely, like a true dragon. He said some bootlicking words, trying to get under the graces of a powerful family. Kale simply smiled, took his things, and nodded before he walked back to his host. That was some wicked magic you used there. You can beat anyone with that alone. Did it affect your health, by the way? Asked Valinor while grabbing his sword like it was the most beautiful maiden in Planetos. Kale chuckled while carrying his new book. I'm fine, Valinor. It was a simple magic. But it's useless outside duels, or against people who know how it works. I can't move too much from that motion. I need to keep concentrated on the spot I want to burn. The distance also complicates things, and honestly, it takes too long to start taking effect. Valinor shrugged. It was nasty. You burned what? His throat? Lungs, ouch. That will take a long time to heal. Heal? Asked Kale while smirking. He will never heal. He will live for 10, 15 years at most before his lungs start failing him. There's a price for trying to take advantage of me, Valinor, and it's never cheap. Valinor's sweat dropped. You could have gotten their prized dragon. I have over 30 dragons in my household, Valinor. One more, one less. Makes no difference. But it's too soon to start burning bridges with the Targaryens. They have a hand to play in my plans, and now they and we are on amicable terms, he said with a grin while entering his palanquin. If you say it, my lord, I shall believe it. You said you would rob them of that book and have them thank you in return. And you delivered. You have my faith. But when you said that they care about their dragons like no other family you've met, please forgive if I'm mistaken, but I don't remember you ever meeting other Dragonlord families, my lord. Kale smirked sarcastically and said before closing the door of his palanquin. Then technically I didn't lie. Chapter 11. Dropping all pretense. During the whole way back, Kale was in silence. His host of armored soldiers guessed that he was too immersed in his prized book to talk to them. Even Valinor thought so. Once they arrived back at the Regalion's main tower, it was already evening, and the sun was already setting on the horizon. Kale walked down from his palanquin. This time he was not limping like a sickly man. Although still pale-looking, Kale walked with elegance and displayed a constant confident smirk on his face. As he passed by his servants that waited for his return outside the tower, he nodded to them. Valinor was walking valiantly beside his liege, with confidence and pride. Once they finally entered the tower and ordered all the servants to go back to their duties, they climbed to the higher levels, the private quarters of the family. Only the siblings were allowed here, but with permission Valinor could come too. Once they entered the private area of the tower, Kale collapsed on the ground, panting hard. Valinor instantly became worried and came to help him. His sister, Vaila, who waited for his return and saw him flaunting his elegance and confidence through the windows, couldn't understand what was going on, but she went to help him as well. My lord, exclaimed Valinor, worried, panicked even, holding him by his armpits and helping him to sit on his comfortable sofa chair. Keep it down, Valinor, said Kale panting, but with a satisfied smile on his face. What's going on here? Why did he suddenly collapse like that? He was looking just perfect before, said Vaila, completely confused but scared. It's nothing, V. I just used some magic to win a duel. Kale answered with a bit of difficulty. He was really feeling weakened right now. What? How? Why? Vaila started speaking in a lost tone, but then shouted in anger. How could Kaelaris put his own health in jeopardy for the sake of a stupid book? He had Valinor with him for the 14. I wish to know that as well, my lady. My lord was behaving perfectly. I even believed it when I saw no after effect whatsoever after the duel. I also don't understand why he did it now that I see his outcome. Both of them cast angry judgmental gazes toward Kale, who simply started laughing. His laugh was kinda creepy due to the pain in his chest and weakened body. How long, do you think, the vultures would stay away if I kept displaying weakness? He said with long pauses between words. What? Both Valinor and Vaila asked at the same time. Our father died 10 years ago. 10 years? I'm 30. Vaila is 9 and 10. For 10 years, I wasn't capable of riding my dragon. How do you think that the other Dragonlords would see us? He asked while taking deep breaths. Hearing no response, he continued, they would see us as weak. They would think that our time has passed and that we are unworthy of our stand. So, tell me, how long would the vultures stay away if I kept displaying weakness? But, my lord, you breathed fire after mounting your dragon, Valinor shouted. And that kept me in bed for 2 days and locked inside this tower for a fortnight with many healers and blood mages coming to see my condition. How long until rumors were spread and everyone discovered that the lord of the sacred Dragonlord family of Regalion is with 1 foot in the grave? Hey, are you really almost dead, Kale? Asked Vaila while hiccuping. She had tears in her eyes. No, I am not far from it, said Kale while looking at her with a gentle smile, despite of his pained visage. But how would the others see it? They would see the family of Regalion as a free meal, said Valinor absent-mindedly. The property, the knowledge, the riches, and in their mind, the key to powerful magic, and more important, my wife and my people. Vaila hugged him tightly and let her tears flow down her pretty face. Even Valinor's eyes watered a bit after hearing that. So, said Valinor, all of that was a ploy? You didn't really want the book, did you? Kale chuckled. Of course I wanted the book, because I fear that what is written in here is indeed our future. Wah. Hodash, Valinor tried to talk, but was instantly cut off. Clairvoyance, said Kale. Claire what? Vaila was confused. The magical gift of seeing the future through visions or dreams. I assume that the Targaryen bloodline has that gift. He raised the book, and this book is related to most, if not all, their visions. His sister and his sworn sword couldn't help but exchange gazes. I'm not talking about some horseshit. He took a pause to catch his breath. I've seen it, the future. The words of that little girl were not lies. Valyria will be doomed in less than 12 years. He decided to let them know about it. He can't do everything by himself. He needs trusted aides. But the other two collapsed on their chairs after hearing that. What? Said Vaila. Why have you got to be joking, brother? I am not. My lord, the Valyrian freehold has been ruling this side of the world for 5,000 years. I am not, shouted Kale, which seemed to make his sister and best friend see the seriousness on his face. But then why did you do all of this? Why did you fight when we should be preparing to leave? Asked Valinor with a solemn tone. We can't, not now, said Kale. Why? Valinor asked. Because of our position. It was Vaila who answered absent-mindedly. The Targaryens leaving can be seen as them feeling ashamed and humiliated by what happened. They will be mocked. But if we leave, considering our status in the freehold, it would give some veracity to their claims. Smart girl, Kale grinned at her, which made her grin back at him. But isn't that a good thing? Asked Valinor. That way others would leave too. And what Valinor? Interrupted Kale again. But this time he was solemn. Do you know why the freehold works? Because all of the Dragonlord families are on the same side. Why are we on the same side? Because we built this together. We all hold this place dear to us, and the freehold is what keeps us together. Without the freehold, each Dragonlord family would go to a corner of the world, and after decades or centuries, war, said both Vaila and Valinor. Finally realizing what Kale was planning, he wanted to let everyone but their family perish in Valyria. This world is too small for too many powerful families. Sharing this world with the Targaryens is already me being generous. The others are not needed, he concluded. Both Valinor and Vaila kept staring at Kale blankly. They never expected the man in front of them to say such words. Was he cruel? Yes, sometimes. But allow the biggest empire in the world to disappear with no survivors just to have no one to contest his dominance. That is not just cruelty, that's ruthlessness. But why did you use magic on the Targaryens? You could have let me fight and I would have won easily, said Valinor, still not understanding. I needed to send a message to increase the morale of our men and to tell the freehold that not only am I alive and well, but growing more and more powerful each day that passes. Kale grinned. The Targaryens were just the prime target. I killed 3 birds with 1 stone. But you kept pretending to be all right. If you had told me, I would have helped you on our way back here, Valinor insisted. The easier magic seems to the others, the more they will fear it. Kale grinned. And now, I'm sure that in 1 day or 2, the whole freehold will know what I did and how easy it was for me to do it, and they will know to not fuck with us. There was a tense silence for almost a minute. Then Vaila and Valinor finally calmed down. Do you really plan to let Valyrians die? Just like that? Asked Vaila while staring at her brother. Their life is not my responsibility. They heard the words of Daenerys Targaryen and treated it as a joke and mockery. Vanity is a deadly disease in this world. But the innocent people, how many innocents died for the sake of the freehold? How many innocents have we killed to take over Essos during the past 5 millennia? Innocent die every day, and don't put the weight of their lives on my shoulders. I'm not their king and I'm not their god. How many innocents have our family enslaved and sacrificed for the sake of blood magic? Sister, do you think that you and I got born without anyone bleeding for it? And no, I'm not talking about mother, but these are our people. They are Valyrians. She shouted. Chaol said nothing, just kept staring at her dead in the eyes with a calm, serene, and yet ruthless gaze. My lady, I think it's best for us to put this conversation on hold. We are clearly not in the best mood for this. We can continue tomorrow. She just nodded and avoided his gaze. She couldn't look at her brother right now. Then she stood up and left, leaving both men behind to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. She will get over it, my lord. I hope so, but you surprise me more and more every day. To think you would be this ruthless, not only to others, but also yourself, Valinor said while staring at his liege. Do you disagree with me as well? Valinor shook his head no. This world is a nasty place. You said yourself, cunts tend to live longer, he grinned. What surprises me is not that, it is your behavior. Right now, if you had a crown on your head, I would have called you your grace instead. Chaol smirked at that. You will have your opportunity for that later. One of Valinor's eyebrows raised, my lord. Tell me, Valinor, are you with me? Chaol's eyes started to glow violet under the dim candlelight. Valinor stared deep into Kaelari's glowing violet eyes. Till the end? Chapter 12. A peaceful day in Valyria. It's been a couple of days since the duel by the Western Watergate. Things in the Valyrian freehold continued as always. Common people didn't really care about the conflicts of the ruling class. But the Dragonlord families knew, and those who were already cooking plans to take over the Regalians' assets decided to take a posture of wait and see. No one wants to be burned from the inside out, and if the rumors were to be believed, effortlessly. No one came back to avenge the Targaryen. They had no backing in the freehold anymore, and everyone only mocked and laughed at them even more than before. They played their role as the perfect victim, with no repercussions or negative aftereffects. At this moment, flying above the capital of Valyria, a massive red dragon could be seen, doing many absurd maneuvers that no sane rider would try. All right, buddy, time for what we practiced. GRA, do the barrel roll. The rider shouted, with excitement in his voice. The red dragon leaned to his left to get some leverage, and using the momentum he twisted his body to his right, folding his wings and rotating twice in the sky before unfolding his wings and stabilizing. We did it, buddy. Ha 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 ha, a maniacal laugh echoed from the top of the dragon. Not wanting to lose, the dragon blasted his green fire to the sky, celebrating with his rider. He was extremely happy with his rider. They finally shared the same love for flying. They did dangerous and exciting sky maneuvers together, and Chaol trusted him with his life. A bond like that was almost impossible, yet it was what most bonded dragons actually wanted. The people from below and other dragon riders nearby were gobsmacked and turned pale after watching the red dragon's maneuvers. What in the name of the 14 was that? Someone shouted from somewhere. Now to the other side, shouted Chaol. Graro! And once again they twisted in the air, to the dismay and fear of the people who watched. Now, up! Chaol commanded once again and held the saddle as hard as he could. The dragon, not waiting a second, instantly skyrocketed upwards, going 90 degrees. They went higher and higher until they passed through the layer of clouds above. You better catch me, or I will haunt you. Chaol laughed and let go of the saddle once they reached the highest point, letting gravity follow its course. They both split in the sky. Chaol closed his eyes and enjoyed the feeling of skydiving, twisting and rotating in the air. Once he opened his eyes, he saw himself surrounded by clouds. In a few seconds, he passed through the layer of clouds and could see the whole Valyrian peninsula from the sky. He had a smile from ear to ear, enjoying the feeling of flight on his own. As he was enjoying the fall, the big red dragon came flying by his side, aiming downwards, parallel to himself, with his wings folded. They slowly approached one another, and once Chaol held the saddle and positioned himself properly, the dragon slowly stabilized the flight and went back to a normal flight position in the sky. What the? Chaol heard from below and laughed even louder. They both enjoyed the flight for over an hour until Kale spotted a perfect place to land, a flattened top of a mountain that overlooked the capital. The dragon followed his wishes and landed on the place, and they both stood there, enjoying the morning breeze while watching the magical city together. You know, I don't really know how to name you, admitted Kale while sitting on top of the red dragon's head, enjoying the view with his buddy. Gru? The dragon responded, which made Kale laugh. They did have a special bond since both of them were born at the same time. Thanks to his family rituals of blood bonding, they are practically brothers, arguably twins on top of that. I have plans and many rituals that I am starting to research, not just for me but for you. So I'm afraid to give you a red dragon name and then have you changing your colors after the ritual. HMMF green smoke came out of the dragon's snout. You know, I'm not from this world, buddy, said Kale while watching the city with a slight smile. Gray, I'm not even your original owner. I'm in his body, but I'm not him. And what pains me is that I know that I will never be able to tell this to anyone. Regardless of how close I am to my family and friends in the future, I feel that there will always be this barrier, always this secret that will put a small distance between me and the others. The dragon said nothing but gently tapped the ground with his tail, well as gently as a dragon of such massive size could be. I've heard from V that you and the previous me never actually met. He only saw you from afar and got scared of your size. So it's no wonder that you don't actually care. But the others? That's complicated. The red dragon let out small wisps of green flame from the corners of his mouth and made some dragon noises. Kale laughed, ha ha ha, I agree. The previous me wasn't worthy of you. And I'm much better, he said before patting the dragon's head gently. But it's good to have at least someone to share these things in this world. At least I don't feel alone anymore. A bright smile appeared on his face. Greya Airgarger, oh, no. There were no dragons in my previous world. We had stories and legends about it. But no. You are my first ever dragon. The same way that I'm your first ever rider. The two of them kept talking and interacting with one another until it was lunchtime. Kale stood up from the dragon's head and walked all his way down the neck until he reached his saddle. A big brown leather satchel was attached to the back of the saddle. From there he removed some fruits and dry meat sandwiches that he himself made. Surprisingly, this wasn't a thing even in Valyria, alongside a bottle of wine. Valyrian dragons don't need to eat every day. They only do so if their food is in small quantities. But knowledgeable dragon riders feed big whales to their dragons so they can go without eating for days. After a good meal on the top of his dragon's head, while enjoying the most magical view that Planitos currently had to offer, both of them enjoyed a long time of serene and calming silence and peace. You know, in my world there was this legend of this big bad red dragon called a Chardalin. Originally I wanted to give you that name, but I am afraid that you will change colors after the rituals I have in mind. GRRRRGR. I agree, I like that name too. And then there's this one big badass dragon called Neltharion. He was so powerful that he almost caused the cataclysm of his world. He was known as Deathwing. But he was a black dragon, not a red one. The red dragon spewed a small green flame after doing some guttural dragon noises. Yeah, that name is awesome. His moniker was cool too. And it's not my fault that they were all villains in my world. Most dragons from these legends were feared. There were quite a few of good-natured dragons, but they weren't as awesome and strong as the evil ones. HNNF, the dragon huffed green smoke from his snout again. Actually, let me show you one of the skills that I have thanks to my previous world. Kale stood up again and fully unwrapped the big satchel, taking out a big blank canvas, a small ornate cloth satchel that, according to the sound, had many glass flasks inside, a foldable wooden stool, and something that Kale himself ordered to be crafted alongside the canvas, a proper support for it made of golden heart wood. He unfolded everything near the edge of the huge cliff, placed everything in the right places, opened the ornate satchel and pulled out many flasks of different colored paints and a set of different sized brushes, alongside small round charcoal slabs. It might take a while, so be patient. For the next 4 to 5 hours Kale stayed there, sitting on his stool, slowly painting the magical view of the capital of Valyria, a sight that in a decade would never be seen again. He decided to have as many memories of this place as possible and record as much as he could. As he was painting the big towers of Valyria on his canvas, he heard a dragon's roar in the distance. Both he and his dragon turned to the source of the sound and saw a big blue dragon coming closer from above, gently and elegantly landing nearby without causing any ruckus. A gorgeous female figure came down from the blue dragon's saddle and slowly and awkwardly walked toward the duo of rider and dragon by the end of the cliff. I've heard of a crazy dragon rider doing absurd air maneuvers above the capital, she said with her soft and gentle voice. Oh, see that, buddy? We are famous already. Kale chuckled before going back to his painting, and the dragon huffed smoke, amused. The girl kept staring at her brother for several seconds. Then she saw what he was doing and was amazed by it. It was so pretty and well done, almost like someone stopped the time above Valyria and captured its glory permanently. I didn't know that you had that skill, brother. Vaila said the first part with an amazed tone, but then dropped into a distant, awkward and ashamed tone when it came to the last word. Kale looked at her and gave her a gentle smile. Oh yeah? If you wish I can teach you, V, it is not that hard, but it does take some dedication and effort. They haven't talked since the day he came back from the duel. Vaila has been in her corner doing God knows what. She didn't join him for meals, nor did she walk around the tower. All she did was stay inside her quarters. Seeing that her brother didn't sound angry, disappointed, or even distant after all that happened, she felt relieved, and gave him a soft smile. Yes, it would be great if you could. She walked to his side and sat on the flat ground, watching her brother painting and enjoying the view herself. Brother, stop that. We already had that talk. If you're going to be my wife, call me like a wife would. If you keep calling me brother, I will get angry. He instantly cut her off. Kale didn't want to distance himself from the only family member he had in this world. Even in his previous world, his family meant the world to him, and after spending over 2 weeks here, he got really close to this girl. Even if he didn't see her as a sister, he felt really close. Close enough to marry her and not feel too awkward about it. Honestly, he could see himself loving her. She stood there for a second before starting over. Kale, about what I said that day, about how I behaved. I'm sorry. I know that it's not your responsibility to save everyone. It's just, this place is our roots, our father and mother lay here. To think that everything that made us, will vanish from existence. She lowered her head. Our things, our people and their family, our parents, grandparents and ancestors' remains will be moved, said Kale. We are not Regal Lion because of Valyria. Valyria is Valyria because we are Regal Lion. Wherever we go, Valyria will be with us, he said while gently painting some light effects on the tower, adding some sun rays of the beautiful sunset of the peninsula. After a few seconds of silence, she nodded. Valyria will always be with us. And I will not fail you, brother. Wherever you go, whatever your plans are, I will always be by your side. I know you displayed a lot of trust in me and Valinor to speak your plans out loud that day, and I want to repay that trust. You can trust me, brother, she said with determination in her eyes while staring at him. Tisk. Kale clicked his tongue, turned to her and painted her nose black with his brush. What did I tell you about calling me brother 1 minute ago, girl? He went back to his painting, leaving a shocked girl with a black nose staring at him. I've always trusted you. It was not a case of, if for you to come and talk to me. It was a question of, when would you do it? You never disappointed me. I lost my memories, you didn't. So obviously you hold this place and its people way more dearly than I do. In my head. I've only been living here for a little over 2 weeks now. She kept staring at him in shock until she frowned. Not taking it lightly, she poked her finger inside one of the bottles of paint and brushed it on his cheek, leaving a deep purple mark. Kale stopped painting instantly and stared at her with wide eyes, which made her burst into laughter. You naughty girl. He let go of his brush and tackled her, tickling her sides and making her laugh even louder until her eyes were in tears. They both rolled on the ground, tackling each other until he came on top of her, and the laughs stopped. Both kept staring deep into each other's violet eyes. His hand gently touched her cheek. Her skin was smooth and delicate. Her arms gently wrapped around his neck. She had fire in her eyes. The stare down lasted for several seconds. No one felt uncomfortable. Kale was the one to take the initiative. Their faces slowly approached until their lips gently touched. Chapter 13. The plan begins. For the next few moons, Kale managed to paint most of the beautiful views of the entire freehold, from Oris to Tyria. He also took his time to paint a picturesque art of Mantaries, since he knew it would be partially swallowed by the disaster, and its beauty would be forever lost as well. Life in Planitos wasn't that hard if you had the right position in society. His house is rich, and they own 2 full volcanoes on the freehold. The only other house that owns 2 of the 14 flames is the first family, the Bellaris. When he heard about the first family, he researched a lot to discover why they were so powerful. Then he discovered that they didn't really have any gift like the other 4. No, they were purely about numbers. Their family traditions created their standing. They were the only one of the sacred 5 families that had more riders than dragons, and considering that Regal Lion had around 30 dragons and was considered the second, it paints an image of how many Bellaris exists. All of their riders are actual family members. Kalaris also low-key started to move his pieces. He gradually started buying more slaves and putting all of them inside the 16 mines that his family owned. His goal was to gather as much mineral as possible in the upcoming decade. He also started buying Valyrian steel ingots. Those were much rarer and more expensive, so he couldn't really buy them in bulk considering that he was trying to be low-key. One might ask why buy Valyrian steel ingots instead of forging them. The reason is simple. It takes way too long for him to forge a single ingot, time that could be better used to research and practice his magic and rituals. Money was meant to be used to save time, and considering he was on a countdown, he needed to be efficient. On the fourth moon, he went to the third family, the Talarian family. They were the people that pretty much invented Valyrian steel. They could forge that metal like no one in the freehold, to the point where no one could even fight their quality and quantity. That day, he placed an order for a Valyrian steel breastplate with shoulder guards, and arm and shin guards. He could probably do it himself, but it would take over a year to do it alone, and he wasn't the best option for forging. He'd rather leave it to the family that has been doing this for over 5,000 years. On the sixth moon was when his plans would start officially. Right now, he was on the Western Watergate, overseeing 5 big ships, capable of carrying over 250 men in each. "Raise the crane," one of them shouted in the background, moving supplies and all necessities inside one of the ships. Cale was overseeing everything from a distance with Valinor and Vaila by his side. Sadly, this place wasn't big enough for both Neltharion and Vaenorin to land here. He decided to go with the name Neltharion because he considered a Chardalyn a mouthful, and for some reason the big flying lizard seemed excited with the prospect of having the name related to a dragon that had the title of Deathwing. Cale laughed a lot that day. "Are you sure we shouldn't have waited a bit longer to start moving, Cale?" asked his sister by his side. The talks about the Targaryens already died down. People barely talk about them anymore. "They haven't forgotten, but I'm sure they won't relate our movements with theirs," answered Cale. "I still think that the place you are targeting is not right, my lord. It's too close to Westeros. It's even considered a part of their land, and those northerners are thick-skulled," said Valinor. Cale chuckled. I know that. Believe me, if I had better options in the future, I would consider other options. Honestly, I'm still partially interested in the Summer Isles, but the truth is, that wall is magical, and I'm afraid that once our time here ends, that will be the magical point of Planetos." Cale still remembered that once in the books Melisandre said how her magic was more powerful the closer she was to the wall. He also knew for sure that the doom of Valyria would signal the end of the magic era of Planetos. Beggars can't be choosers, but even so, the 5 ships are only a recon party. They are there to settle a simple outpost and protect it from the barbarians of Skagos. Even if the natives had the advantage in numbers, his Valyrian soldiers had top-quality equipment and weapons. Numbers alone don't win battles. If he sees that there's no way to settle on that island, he would no doubt spend his following years preparing an attack and conquest of Summer Isles. "What if they request aid from the king in the north?" asked Vaila. She spent her months learning magic with Cale, but also Westerosi history. Valinor chuckled. "Don't worry, my lady. Those dumb savages will never call for aid. They hate the Starks and never followed their rules. It's ironic that they are considered part of the North when even their own king doesn't give 2 shits about what they do on that island. Not even taxes collected because there's no need for it. Skagosi has no money." Vaila nodded. "But I still can't believe you are considering taking us, dragons, people made of fire, to the coldest place in the world. It sounds like a bad joke, I won't lie." She had a little scorn in her voice. Cale laughed. "Ha ha ha. Yes, I understand your point of view, but again, that place is close to so many interesting things. The wall is just one of them. What is beyond it also attracts my attention, a lot." Vaila raised her eyebrows. "Are you talking about the legends beyond the wall, or are you into ice spiders?" She had a sarcastic smirk on her face when she finished her question. Cale shuddered. "I want no deal with spiders." After collecting himself, he continued, "But those legends are interesting. I want to know more about it. From heart trees to the others, everything that is magical deserves attention." Valinor raised his eyebrow. "Do you believe in those legends of the others?" "Oh, you can bet that I do, dear friend. But, my lord, according to the legends, they are ruthless and merciless creatures. They attack without provocation," Valinor said passionately. "Wouldn't you know better, Valinor? You are a descendant of the first men, aren't you?" Cale asked. Valinor nodded reluctantly. "I, my lord. My father was Valyrian through and through, but my mother was a noblewoman from some minor northern house, very closely related to the Starks. I see no problem with that, Valinor. In my opinion, you have a rather unique bloodline. The blood of the first men is said to be magical, and gives them unnatural abilities," replied Cale. "My lord, you didn't." The sworn sword tried to speak about the topic of the others, but Cale interrupted him instantly. The legend of the 13th commander of the Night's Watch is what intrigues me. And about that northern sorceress that he brought from beyond the wall, deathly pale skin and hair, glowing blue eyes, yet beautiful beyond words, sounds familiar? Both Vaila and Valinor's eyes went wide. If, and remember only if, it was who I think it was, it means that they are able to communicate. They both were said to get married after all. But again, it's just a theory and a big if. Cale wasn't sure that the others, or as the show named them, White Walkers, were a purely evil force that existed for the sake of destruction and death. He did read all books from that damn author, and if there's one thing that the man was known for was writing complex gray characters. To have a tale about gray characters following their own schemes and desires, just to end it with a battle between good and evil? I don't buy it. Those showrunners simplified too much and removed the nuance and morally ambiguous tone of the books. Night King was not even an enemy in the books. He was a Lord Commander of the Night's Watch that married a possible other sorceress and then got killed for claiming to be the king in the north. He was never the source of the others. Neither he was the first other. He was a human. At most, he would have been turned into a white. If the others can communicate to the point of actually getting married, doesn't that mean that there is something else there? But, Cale, what if they are merely creatures that hate the living and can't communicate, just like the legend says? Asked Vaila, quite nervous. Then we are lucky, because we are stockpiling Valyrian steel, and we have a squadron of 10 dragon riders. Worst case scenario, we run away. I'm not risking our lives for this, but I can't just ignore it. Those creatures have magic, and they know how to use it. That's enough of a reason to check it out. As the ships were preparing to sail away from the docks, a small host approached Cale's location. They wore mostly white and purple tunics with many gold assets. They would look quite rich and important, if this wasn't Valyria, of course. Gold here was currency, but a sign of wealth in Valyria was on the steel, not on gold. Compared to Cale's and Vaila's robes that were adorned with Valyrian steel buttons, chains, hooks, and little brooches, gold was nothing. "Ah, Lord and Lady Regalion, how pleasant to find you around these parts," said a young man, around 20 named days old and with hair pretty similar to Cale's. Cale stopped and looked at him with an indifferent gaze. "And you are?" "Oh, I apologize for not introducing myself. I'm Old Valyria, Lord of the Dragonlord family of Valyria, the 11th of the Freehold," he said while bowing slightly, but he never said the words that Cale was expecting, which instantly made him narrow his eyes. "I see. Well, you seem to know who I am, so I believe introductions on our part are unnecessary. How can I help you, Lord Valyria?" "Oh, nothing at all, Lord Regalion. I just saw you here with 5 ships leaving the Western Water Gate, and I thought that you would be following the Targaryens' footsteps, leaving the Freehold," Orion said with an easy smile on his face. Cale chuckled. "You really believe that 5 big ships and over 1,000 soldiers is all of my host? Lord Valyria, that's not even 1/10 of the numbers. But I forgive you for your mistake. It's not like you know how powerful the sacred 5 families are." Orion's mouth twitched a little bit, but he covered it well. "You are right. I don't know how powerful the sacred 5 are. They are so mysterious. The Bellarese have unprecedented numbers. The Malgrin have the strongest dragons and best breeders. The Talarian are the best crafters in the hold. And the Seldries have the strongest combatants. So I apologize to you. For I don't know what the Regalion have. All I know is that there's only 2. He had a small, mocking smirk on his lips. Cale laughed out loud. "Oh, I understand. I really understand. I forgive you for your ignorance, Lord Valyria, but I can shine some light on your doubts if you want." "Sure. It would be an honor to receive knowledge from the Lord of Regalion." "The Regalion have me," Cale said while staring at him with an easygoing smile. Orion waited for a few seconds for the continuation, but got nothing. And he gave a smirk and proceeded with his mockery. Cale's eyes glowed a bright purple light. "There's no and Lord Valyria, I alone am enough." As he completed his words, Cale hit the ground with his cane and a ring of fire came out of it, going through the small host of Valyrians, including Orion himself. All of them fell on the ground, some with slightly burned skin, some with just burned clothes such as Orion. Caleres then walked past him with his sister and Valinor. "You should be careful, Lord of Valyria. You know what they say about people who play with fire, and in the end, I'm not the only Regalion in my family," he said as he pointed to his sister proudly. As the Regalion party walked further from the other Dragonlord family, Cale turned to Valinor and spoke with a solemn face. "Send a couple of riders to protect the ship, and let the soldiers know that they have to contact me as soon as they step on that island, no delays," which prompted Valinor to nod instantly and pull out a glass candle from his robes and proceeded to do what he was commanded. "Cale, don't worry, V. They are just some leeches, nothing that can't be burned. but it bothers me to be watched and followed. That fool was just a test. Someone is eyeing us, someone from the top. Chapter 14. Summons. Kaelares was in his library studying, writing, and researching possibilities of fire magic. Valyrian magic itself is based on fire and blood. Most outsiders would consider the fire to be related to fire magic or dragons. At the same time, most people believe that the term blood comes from the blood of the dragon. They are wrong. Some sorceries require dragon fire, such as the creation of Valyrian steel. But the actual magic comes from the fires of the 14. Those volcanoes are some sort of nexus for the magic of this side of the world. But when it comes to blood, people couldn't be more wrong. The term blood comes from the sacrifice of the living. They kill slaves, thousands, if required, for the sake of magic. The Regal Lion blood was an outlier of all this. They had magic, and they did not require the 14. But they have always been so few in numbers that they can't really cause an imbalance in the overall freehold power structure. They are number 2 because they had bodies and magic above human comprehension. When one considers the question quantity or quality, that very question is directly related to the 2 top families of the freehold. Valyrians had quantity, abnormally so. Their harem-based incestuous tradition bred dozens of pure-blooded Dragonlords. Individually, they were as normal as anyone else, but there is power in numbers. Regal Lion, on the other hand, was the opposite. It was quality. Their bodies were above human limits. Their lifespan was absurdly high considering how long a regular human lived. Considering that in Planetos, an average healthy highborn would live up to his 70s or 80s with outliers such as Aemon Targaryen, Regal Lions had an average of 130 years of age, with outliers living up to 180. But our strength comes with a cost. We are humans and at the same time, we are not. Our genes are incompatible. Many ancestors tried. We are stronger, faster, live longer, and have unique magic that doesn't really require rituals or conditions. No wonder we are the second regardless of our numbers. Who would fight us? We can knock dragon riders off of their dragons with a well-aimed fireball. We don't need a bow and can cast in one hand while steering our own dragon with the other. Or holding a sword. It's like we bring guns to a sword fight. The only ones that could challenge us head-on would be the Valyrians. But why would they? They are the first. Even if they get to knock us down, there will be a new second. It would be a never-ending job for them. His study time was interrupted by 3 knocks on the heavy wooden door. Knock, knock, knock. My lord, said Valinor, a liaison of the Talarian family has arrived. He said that he is here to deliver your armor. Kael instantly got up and walked towards the door. Today he was dressed in new palace robes that he ordered to be made, for both him and his sister. The robes were mainly black and silver with extremely detailed patterns. The inner part had a layer of red velvet, and the robes were so long that they would almost touch the ground. Kael constantly would wear the long, loose sleeves slightly folded to display the red color. It was his favorite color after all. Picture here, if the web novel Overlords allows it well. He also had a couple of Valyrian steel rings on each hand. The curious part of these rings is that 2 of them had a hollow area, as if they were crafted to hold a jewel, but there was no jewel slotted yet. It's about time. They took almost 5 fucking moons to get it done, and I haven't even requested the helmet yet, he exclaimed in excitement, but an undertone of snarkiness could be heard from his voice, especially towards the end of his speech. You can't really blame them, my lord. You requested their best work, and with the details that you provided on your so-called schematics, no wonder it took them so long, said Valinor with a small grin on his face. Kael could only sigh. I guess you were right. But to think that the armor would only be completed after our scouting party landed on Skagos. It's rather depressing, isn't it? They had a 2-moon head start. To be fair, they only arrived there a week ago, my lord. They are still preparing the first outpost as per your instructions. They did have some clashes with the local population, though. I got the report from Captain Valen today, not long ago. Oh? Tell me the details, requested Kael as they walked down the massive stairway of the Regal Lion Tower. As pretty as this place was, as magical as this place felt, especially with the sunset sun rays shining through the large windows, these stairs were the work of the devil himself. The fucking Night's Watch has an elevator. Why we Valyrians can't have one as well? When we move, building elevators will be one of my top priorities. Fuck these stairs. The host of 1,000 men encountered a local lord from House Krall of Deep Down. They had 2 times our numbers, but even so we won decisively. The difference in the quality of equipment and training showed. According to the reports, they were mostly barbarians swinging poorly crafted blades, made of frozen fire. Kael laughed out loud. Oh, that's hilarious. They have such priceless material and can't put it to its proper use. It only shows that treasure in the hands of idiots is no different from shit. Kale had a huge smile on his face, but I'm happy about it. Frozen fire? Eh, that certainly changes things. Valinor nodded. But the volcano must be dormant for years since no news of they possessing any was ever passed down to others. The Night's Watch would know if it was active. Eastwatch by the Sea has the perfect angle to capture any possible eruptions. It's not a problem. It produces frozen fire so it's not extinct. It only makes the island even more desirable now. What if there's more than one? If we can get at least 2, it would be perfect. Having 3 would be optimal though. It would maximize our productivity. Don't be too greedy, my lord. We are lucky with finding one. Let's not count on the 3rd yet. You said yourself that the higher the expectation, the harsher the disappointment. You were right. They kept talking about what happened in Skagos as they went down. It took them quite some time to reach the bottom of the tower. As they reached the door, there were 2 men waiting for him. One was ahead of a carriage of goods. He wore presentable clothes, but nothing outstanding or extravagant. The other, on the other hand, wore luxurious clothes of the highest quality, which made Kale frown. He turned to Valinor. I thought that you said the liaison of the Talarian arrived. You commented nothing about a second one. Valinor was about to reply, but the man wearing luxurious clothing stepped up. Fire and blood, Lord of Regalion. As a matter of fact, I have just arrived, he said, and gave a respectable bow, which eased Kale's eyebrows by quite a bit. Fire and blood, but I must apologize. I don't think we were introduced. I came here to deliver this. He handed Kale a very fancy scroll. This is a summons for the next Dragonlord conclave. My duty is to bring this to you as your presence is necessary. The other families will be there too, at least the other 39. Kale nodded and took the scroll, which prompted the man to bow again and take his leave. Lord of Regalion, said the other man while bowing way lower than the previous liaison. I came here merely to deliver the goods that you requested. Your armor and Valyrian steel ingots are inside the carriage. Your men already confirmed the goods, but you are welcome to check them as well. The Lord of Talarian is excited to work with you. He said that if you were to send double the amount of ores, he will charge you 5% less on the next order of ingots. Kale managed to hide his quick frown by pretending to be reading the scroll, placing it in front of his face. He then lowered it and displayed his easygoing smile as always. That would be wonderful, but I don't have the need for more ingots than that. It's merely for research and magic purposes. But tell Lord of Talarian that I appreciate the offer. The man nodded. I shall take my leave then, my lord. Fire and blood, fire and blood. Once the man left, Kale's frown came back. I don't like this. Valinor shrugged. They can't do anything. You are not doing anything wrong or suspicious. I believe the main reason why they are keeping an eye on us is because of our interaction with the Targaryen that day. Give it time, and they will stop once they find nothing. Kale nodded. But time is something that we are running out of, and now this damn thing, he said and tossed the scroll to Valinor. If it looks like a scheme, smells like a scheme, and feels like a scheme. Valinor just chuckled while reading it. I can't deny that, my lord. But the conclave is a rather common thing. It happened many times for many different reasons in the past, and I doubt that whomever is keeping an eye on us would pull all the other families together just for us. There must be other reasons as well. Kale nodded. It's not all bad. I can officialize my magic research expedition. It won't be taking place right now, but at least that can misdirect prying eyes from our actions. But it's better to be safe than sorry. Valinor, I want you to find dirt on the other sacred families, especially Bellarese and Seldares. Valinor raised an eyebrow in confusion, but Kale explained. They are the only military-focused Dragonlord families among the Sacred Five. The Talarian only care about forging. The Malgarin are even less of a problem. They are dragon breeders. Find whatever you can in all of them, but focus on the 1st and 3rd family. How much time do we have until the conclave? A fortnight, my lord. Kale nodded. Then we have to be quick and efficient. Find any shady business that we can use in case they try anything funny. Who will accompany you, my lord? Only you and Vaila will be coming with me. Valinor wasn't happy about it, my lord. The other 38 Dragonlords will be there. Yes, they will, and in an enclosed space, without their dragons and with limited personnel considering the size of the place. No one would be dumb enough to start a fight with us there. We hold the complete advantage in a place like that, and if they try, well, we will manage to cross a dozen or so Dragonlord families from our records. A sinister grin appeared on Kale's lips as he concluded. Valinor nodded. He agreed with Kale. If anyone was crazy enough to fight with someone with the magical power that Kale had, inside an enclosed space with limited numbers and without dragon advantage, they were fucked. What about our operation in Skagos then, my lord? I'm pretty sure they will conclude the outpost in 7 days, considering the 700 new slaves from House Crowl. Tell them to not explore on their own and turtle up inside the walls of the outpost. It's only a week's delay. I will be flying there right after the conclave ends. Order them to remain there until I arrive. Leave the skags alone until then. And where is Vaila, by the way? Kale was rather confused. He hasn't seen his soon-to-be wife the whole day. Valinor just laughed. She was here when the liaison of the Talarian arrived. When she saw your armor, she went straight to her room saying that she will make a schematic for armor for herself. Kale laughed as well. Who would have guessed that such a gorgeous and soft girl would understand the beauty of armor and weapons? Ah, my lord, quite a catch for you, eh? A lady that can appreciate the beauty of armors, swords, and dragons. Woman of culture, Valinor said, chuckling. Kale came to his side and tapped his shoulders and smirked at him before walking back up those abysmal stairways. Oh, my dear friend, you have no idea. Chapter 15. Dragonlord Conclave. The day of the conclave soon arrived. Kale went out of his tower on Neltharion Way earlier than he was supposed to. Vaila and Valinor would come later when the actual meeting started. After gathering the intel on the 5 sacred Dragonlord families, he had a hunch of what this conclave was really all about. Ironically, he wasn't really the reason, but he could still profit from it. The conclave would always be held in the capital tower in the capital of Valyria. It was the biggest building in the freehold and possibly in all Planetos at this point. It was so vast that the top floors were open, supported by large carved pillars, an area dedicated for the dragons to land and rest while the Dragonlords went to the lower floors. The capital tower was built right in the center of Valyria. If there were any changes in the laws, an important announcement, declaration of war, state of emergency, used in case of external invasions or dangerous rebellions, trials and other related things, this was the place for it. It also held the record of all free men, nobles, Dragonlords, and even dragons birthed in Valyria, along with marriages and divorces, although they called it severance in Valyria. And yes, there were divorces. This place also had the record of everyone's crimes, lands, and businesses. Just looking at the surface, one would think that this place was extremely modern, as it did have modern structure and documentation. But one can't ignore the fact that men in Planetos were not born equal. Free men had some rights, nobles had more rights, and Dragonlords had even more rights. Based only on that, one would understand that justice here by no means meant equality. For example, if a free woman marries a nobleman, she would have no right to request for severance. They were not equals even after marriage, and the same goes for a noblewoman or man marrying into a Dragonlord family. As for why people would do that, not every family was like the Bellaries with hordes of children. Sometimes they would only birth men or women and not both. Many times human hearts and desires speaks louder than family duties, and people want to marry someone they love. Conflict between powerful families, nobles, and Dragonlords would also cause the death of many. So, to repopulate their own, they would marry lower caste, in order to prevent having an equal spouse from a possible rival family, just like the Targaryens did with the Valerians in the books. From a distance, Kale could see the gargantuan building. The main tower itself was huge, and had a massive dragon statue bigger than Neltharion on top of it, with many smaller towers surrounded and connected to the main building. Golden domed roofs, detailed carved walls with massive golden dragon statues on top of the massive lower area of the tower, connected with a huge long bridge that faced the sea, made this place look more magical than anywhere in this world. Again, image here for reference. I'm glad I painted this place. I don't think I can replicate its majesty with my resources alone. As he landed on the top floors of the capital tower with Neltharion, dismounting his best lizard buddy right after, and leaving him to the care of the poor souls that will have to feed him there. I pay your salaries, you better fucking feed him well. He eyed the 10 or so dragon handlers. As he went toward the stairway, there was only dismay on his face. More fucking stairs. He walked down the stairs while enjoying the view of the whole capital through the fancy glass windows. Valyria was beautiful indeed, and he will forever miss this place. But it also cemented his desire to build something that could one day be equal or perhaps surpass it. Kale didn't notice, but for a while now he has been very into magic. Who can blame him? Magic is magic after all. Who doesn't want to cast fireballs and ride dragons? But his desire for magical knowledge slowly turned into something more than just a need for survival. It became passion. He walked into what looked to be a lounge area. He could see several comfortably padded benches made of well-carved stone. Even the floor had details of dragons dancing all around, and many sources of light would be hanging from the floor like lamps. But there was no energy cable. They were just hanging there, illuminating the room like small stars on many corners of the round room. But what took his attention was what was in the center, a round rock of purely black material on top of what Looked like a support made of Valyrian steel with engraved Valyrian words. A meteorite. Kale's eyes went wide. He didn't know what was inside this place. He never actually came in here before, and stuff like this wasn't really recorded in his library since his position allows him to come here anytime he wants anyway. One man approached him when he reached there, and by the look of the man it seemed that he was being expected by someone. It was somewhat weird considering he came way earlier than was intended. Fire and blood. You must be Lord of Regal Lion, correct? The man asked. He had long hair and beard, but he looked young. The top half of his hair was platinum, while the lower part of his hair was golden blonde. His eyes were pale blue, and even his beard had tufts of platinum and gold. His robes were fancy, but not extravagant like Dragonlord's, which led Kale to believe that he was a servant. Fire and blood. Yes, I am. And whom should you be? Kale nodded in acknowledgement. This floor was only for Dragonlords, so whomever this man served, it was someone with influence and power. My name is Ilandes. I was waiting for your arrival, my lord, he said respectfully. Kale raised one of his eyebrows. Am I expected? This early? The man simply nodded and offered a welcoming and friendly smile. Yes, my liege would like to have a word with you. Knowing that he didn't have much to do until the conclave started other than sightseeing, which was the reason he came early in the first place, he accepted. Sure thing, lead the way. Hours went by, and slowly roars of dragons echoed through the capital tower, many Dragonlords arriving one after the other. Even in Valyria, the sight of many riders congregating in one place was an uncommon sight. For a Dragonlord family to live in the capital, they are either extremely powerful or pitifully weak. Of the 40 families, around 25 to 30 lived outside the capital and would come from time to time. Kale arrived and saw the room already half full. His sister and Valinor were waiting as well. When one thinks of a council room, it's either a huge table with many seats for the big lords to sit and talk, similar to King Arthur's Round Table, but for Dragonlords, that's stupid. First of all, most Dragonlords are at each other's throats to rise in their ranks and gain more power. No one would sit beside a possible rival, and no one would trust a possible rival to be seated next to them either. So, the whole room was basically a huge round room, with the whole map of Valyria painted in the center, with many comfortable throne-like chairs that were spread across the room, making a full circle around the map of Valyria in the center, but they were significantly spaced from one another. The only seats near those thrones were seats prepared for their own men. Each throne did, however, have its own small end tables with wine, fresh fruits, and some other snacks nearby. Kale could see a crowd of platinum-haired cunts all over the place, dressing in their most expensive clothes. Almost like this was prom night and everyone around wanted to be voted the prom queen. He couldn't really complain since his own wardrobe was beyond extravagant. His casual clothes were more expensive than most of these people's regal attire. As for colors, everyone here seemed to love black. It was black and gold, black and silver, black and red, black and purple. Add a secondary color with black, and you got yourself presentable clothing for the event. At least I'm mostly silver and red. Well, I do have some black, but, at least I wear 3 colors and black isn't the main one. Kale chuckled. Where have you been? Did you get lost, my lord? Asked Valinor in a low tone, almost a whisper, but sarcastically. He couldn't help it. He would never do it out loud when in front of others and ruin the prestige of his liege, even if they were best friends and would bicker at one another in private. You could have asked me to come with you, Kale, said Valyria with a soft smile. She wore dressy clothes similar to his own, with the same patterns and colors. It seemed she really got into his new fashion style. It's all right. I saw a lot, learned a lot. Can't say it was time wasted. Kale chuckled as he sat down on his own chair and grabbed some wine. Let's just hope this will be interesting and not a complete waste of time. As every Dragonlord was talking among their own inner circles, time slowly passed until the final one arrived. This one was an old man, slightly hunched with a long, thick, silvery beard. He wore pure black robes, just black. Details? Almost none could be seen since he wore a dark gray cloak over his shoulders that dragged on the floor below as he walked. The chain that tied his cloak in front of his chest was made with Valyrian steel, though. He walked with a cane that looked milk-white, almost as if it was glowing under the sunlight. His long braided hair of silver and strands of gold fell on his shoulders and back like a cape, and his eyes were deep purple. I apologize for my lateness, he said as he slowly walked towards the one empty throne remaining in the room. The low-ranked families kept paying attention to 4 particular individuals as the old man walked to his seat, and 3 of these 4 individuals kept staring at Kale, who in turn kept staring daggers at the man with a deep frown while gripping the arm of his chair. Valyria and Valinor got quite surprised by Kale's extreme reaction. He was always so calm and collected. What could possibly make him behave like this? But they decided to stay by him in silence, considering that now every other lord was paying attention to him. The first hour of the meeting was mainly the lower families bragging that they raised their ranks in the last decade or so, and how powerful they got since the last conclave, while the ones that got weaker simply let their snarky remarks of how underhanded and untrustworthy those said families were. Classical sore loser behavior. Once that was over, the old man coughed to get everyone's attention and started talking about more personal matters. First, I would like to offer my condolences to Lord of Regalion for your loss. I met your Lord Father years back. He was an honorable and trustworthy man. I hope your family can remain strong even after his passing. I know how vital one person is to your family, he said with an amicable smile towards Kale, but most keep people could see his eyes narrowing. Kale chuckled. I appreciate the sentiment, Lord of Valyria, even if it's a decade late. We are small, yes, but united. I don't think you would understand. I'm talking about the family size, of course. He grinned as he replied. The silence remained for a few seconds until the old man said again, I've heard of what happened to you, Lord of Regalion. A whole fortnight to recover. Are you sure you are healthy enough? We can proceed to let you go back and rest if it's better for your health. Kale laughed. Don't worry about it, Lord of Valyria. I'm pretty healthy. 2 families could attest to that, although only one remains in the freehold. But you don't have to concern yourself. I'm young and have all the time in the world to recover if anything like that happens again. That's good then. Would be a shame to lose such an important family in the freehold due to some sickness or wicked magic, even if the said family has the least amount of members. He concluded and turned to some other lord, and they started to have their own talk, rudely ignoring Kale and giving him no chance to reply. Both Vaila and Valinor frowned at that. They didn't know how or even when the Valyria and Regalion families became so antagonistic towards one another. It wasn't normal, and Kalares knew about it. Lord of Regalion, a gruff, extremely tall man with a strong build, said. He had the classic Valyrian features, but was dressed in sleeveless tunics that displayed thick arms. The man was comparable to the mountain in Kale's eyes. How can I help you, Lord of Talarian? He answered back with a friendly smile. We appreciate your patronage of our shops. I would like to personally tell you that if you double the order from the last time for the amount of Valyrian steel, I will personally give you a 10% discount. We can't just let such a good business opportunity with such an esteemed client die down because of greed, can we? Everyone looked at Kale, and then towards Valyria, who was with his eyes slightly narrowed. Well, if you offer me so much, I'm sure going to accept the offer. I will let the taskmasters inside my mines know about it, so they can start collecting the ores. Kale replied calmly with narrowed eyes. I'm curious, Lord of Regalion, said a man or a woman. Honestly, people from the Seldries family were all androgynous. You can't tell men from women unless you see what's between their legs. Kale will assume that it is a he because Valyrian laws prioritize males over females for the headship of the family. Kale acknowledged him. What are you doing with all of this Valyrian steel? I've heard that you bought quite a large quantity of it, even your own armor. Kale shrugged. We are a family based in magic. We use Valyrian steel for many things. As for the armor, I just wanted some. Is there a problem with it? I mean, Lord Valyria has more than a couple of them, and no one is asking him questions. Am I right? He grinned. But I'm curious as well, Lord of Seldries. Why did you send some annoying bug to test me on the Western Watergate some time ago? Lord of Seldries frowned slightly but recovered very quickly. Kale noticed, though as many others also did. I must ask your pardon, Lord of Regalion, because I don't really understand your question. What are you insinuating? Kale raised an eyebrow as gave him a soft smile. Nothing. It must be my mistake. But since it wasn't you, and it wasn't from Lord of Valyria, considering he has no reason to send small leeches to test me, and the other 2 families are on a good trading agreement with my family, I can assume that the shrimp came on his own. With that in mind then, I will just announce that the next maggot that comes to annoy me will be burned alive. That is, unless someone gives me a good reason to let them live. The hall was in silence. Many lords were amused. Some were quite clueless, but some were frowning. If their backers don't speak up, they will suffer retaliation. But if their backers speak up, the whole point will be moot. Kale has them on check, and he was smiling about it. One of them, though, didn't get the message and stood up. You would be breaking the ancient laws of our freehold if you started attacking and burning other equal families. The other families won't stand by when faced with such heinous disrespect, he shouted. Kale could see an annoyed expression on Seldries' face and had to hold back his chuckle. Well, if others come to my business seeking trouble on their own accord, they are already disrespecting the laws that you are so heroically trying to protect, and by the same laws, I can protect myself from such horrible acts. After all, it's not like someone is holding a knife to anyone's throat and commanding them to do so, is it? His grin went wider as he turned to the loud man. And you are terribly mistaken, Lord of. Who cares? You and I are not equal.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.